gasped in astonishment as they saw Rain increasing his speed by almost 1 fish per day. Explore more at Empire. This rate of progress is frightfully fast. When Rain completed the third training task on the 5th day, even those around him who had anticipated his quick progress couldn't help but be shocked. How the hell can he be so fast? He passed the third training task in just 5 days. A young man named Archero couldn't help but mutter. Because he had already spent 21 days and was still stuck at 7 fish an hour, unable to make any headway. Now Rain has surpassed most of us and is on the same pace as Frode, a young man named Doug said gravely. Yes, now the only ones undergoing the 4th training task are Frode and Rain. Based on his speed of progress, catching up to Frode seems just a matter of time. However, he'll need at least half a month to catch up to Frode. After all, Frode has already reached 22 fish an hour. A young man pointed out the buzz-cut man fighting madfish in the sea. Maybe, it won't take that long. Doug looked at Rain for a while, then turned to glance at Frode, who was battling in the water. Sure enough, Rain's progress in the 4th training task was frighteningly fast. On the 2nd day, he pushed his killing speed to 12 fish an hour. On the 3rd day, he reached 15. On the 4th day, 19. On the 5th day, he directly reached 24. He had already surpassed Frode's 23. What kind of monster is this? The rate of improvement seems to be getting faster and faster. The surrounding group of young people was practically scared out of their wits. On the 6th day, Rain's best was killing 26. Others might think that Rain was close to breaking through to 30. But only Rain knew he had hit his limit. 26 an hour was already him going all out. Excluding the use of his core skill, Strength Burst, clearly, 26 was still a little short of 30. Rain knew the problem. It was that the time to kill a single coastal madfish was still a little bit too long. This was closely related to insufficient attack power. Tomorrow was the last day Rain had set for himself. If he still couldn't complete it, he planned to activate Strength Burst to increase his killing power and complete the task of killing 30 coastal madfish. If possible, Rain would of course prefer to follow Master Ganther's training plan step by step. Because through the previous training tasks, Rain had understood that Master Ganther's training was tightly linked step by step. This training was very effective, not only to develop human potential, but also to deepen the mastery of combat skills. These two are the foundation of a person's combat power. And Rain's core skill, Strength Burst, was more like an amplifier of combat power. Once the foundation was solidly laid, and then amplified, the overall combat power could be further increased. This logic was simple, so Rain had been trying to complete the training tasks following the normal training method. But his time was limited, so this was a last resort. On the morning of the 7th day, a group of young people around, with mixed feelings, watched the peer who might set a new record. And Rain glanced at the inner breathing technique on his Night Transcendent panel, noticing that after his own arduous practice and the secret medicine provided by Master Ganther, the inner breathing technique had reached LV4, 898/1000. So he decided not to rush into using Strength Burst, but to try and raise the inner breathing technique to LV5, half a day later. As Rain sheathed his sword, the system prompt came. Your skill inner breathing technique has improved. Experience +2. Congratulations. Your skill inner breathing technique has been raised to LV5. Just then, Rain suddenly felt his skin starting to heat up, and there was also a tingling, oddly peculiar sensation. Suddenly, another system prompt sounded. Ding, it has been detected. Ding, has been detected that the host's inner breathing technique has reached the minimum level required to fuse and enhance the giant bear breathing technique. Current conditions are met. Fusion into a new breathing technique is possible. Would you like to proceed with the fusion? Yes/no note. After fusion into a new breathing technique, it will replace the original giant bear breathing technique and the inner breathing technique. Rain sharply noticed the word enhance, so he didn't hesitate at all, silently affirming yes in his mind. The next second, 2 streams of warm energy, one moving from the outside in and the other from the inside out, merged together. Although he had anticipated this outcome, when Rain truly felt this moment, he was exceedingly excited. This must be his second major gain from coming to train with Master Ganther, aside from unlocking the melee combat skill effect Precision. Although, he still didn't know how much improvement the fusion of the breathing techniques would bring him. Ding, fusion commencing, continuing fusion. Clearly, the system seemed to have accelerated this fusion process. Otherwise, according to Rain's estimation, this fusion process alone could have taken days. But now, it was completed in just a few minutes. Ding! Fusion and modification of the giant bear breathing technique and the inner breathing technique. Successful, please name the new breathing technique. Naming, Rain was momentarily stunned. This was indeed a bit of a headache. He was notoriously bad at naming. Rain felt the new breathing technique. It was powerful and seamless, integrating the internal and external into one. But it was clearly based on the giant bear breathing technique, upgraded by the inner breathing technique into a new breathing technique that considered both internal and external breathing. This adaptation and improvement seemed to be adaptive adjustments made after combining Rain's current circumstances. It turned the originally general-purpose giant bear breathing technique into a more specialized breathing technique. Continue reading stories on Empire if put in proportion. It could be said that about 60 to 70% of the new breathing technique was still the original giant bear breathing technique, but the rest was no longer the same. If that's the case, shall it be called King Bear breathing technique? That will do, Rain thought to himself. Ding, King Bear breathing technique has been successfully named, and the secret techniques related to the original giant bear breathing technique have also been adjusted accordingly. The initial skill level of the King Bear breathing technique after fusion is LV5, 0/2000. Thank goodness, the skill level of the new breathing technique remained at LV5. Rain nodded. As for the first statement, the secret techniques related to the original giant bear breathing technique, Rain knew this referred to the original secret skill, Roaring Strike. However, the losses were not small. After the fusion, it consumed the experience of the giant bear breathing technique at level 5, which Rain had accumulated over several months since becoming a formal knight. From this aspect, it seems that skills like breathing techniques are the hardest to improve, even with the supplementation of refining blackwood oil, and it would still require years of hard training. After the transformation was complete, Rain felt a stir in his heart. He naturally wanted to quickly experience the differences between the new King Bear breathing technique and the previous giant bear breathing technique. Therefore, while still in the seawater, Rain couldn't help but stand on the seabed, practicing the first move of the giant bear breathing technique, standing on one leg in a lunge, arms raised parallel, and slowly coordinating with his breathing. Very soon, Rain felt the differences. Firstly, in terms of breathing, if it had been the original giant bear breathing technique, practicing underwater would have been impossible. Before, taking a deep breath underwater would likely have resulted in choking. But the adapted and improved King Bear breathing technique allowed it. At this moment, by utilizing external skin breathing, Rain was able to train in the new King Bear breathing technique even underwater, suggesting a possibility of practicing it anywhere. At the same time, he could clearly feel a mysterious energy constantly circulating within him, as if a warm current, slightly strengthening in amplitude and speeding up as he practiced the King Bear breathing technique. When Rain performed the second pose of the breathing technique, similar to a Russian press, he could keenly sense that the strengthening amplitude quickened a bit, and the circulation speed slightly increased again. Interestingly, this mysterious energy, through its pace of travel, seemed to be indirectly guiding Rain, as if instructing and adjusting his current breathing technique posture. To give an analogy, it was as if initially Rain was practicing the standard push-up, but now, if he continued with the standard push-up, that mysterious energy would encounter resistance in its flow, would spontaneously guide Rain to spread his hands a bit wider, turning into a wide grip push-up for training, and when Rain adjusted to a wide grip push-up, the mysterious energy's flow rate would increase. Through this process, it seemed to tell Rain that this was presently the most efficient and suitable new breathing posture for him. This made Rain extremely pleased. At the same time, he could not help but admire the creator of the inner breathing technique for being truly impressive. To be able to slowly adjust a general-purpose breathing technique into a specialized breathing technique suitable for each individual through such a combination of internal and external breathing. After Rain felt and operated the new King Bear breathing technique for a while, he suddenly recalled something Master Ganther had said before: when you feel the energy within you, try to guide it into your sword. With a slight stir in his heart, Rain, does Master Ganther mean to draw out this strand of mysterious energy and attach it to the sword? Clearly, the key to the fourth training task, the 1 hour, 30 coastal madness fish kill, lies in the Master's words. Thus, Rain, at the bottom of the sea, tried to mobilize this strand of mysterious energy within him to his glimmering greatsword. When he focused his consciousness on the mysterious energy, there was indeed some effect. The energy started to move from within his body toward his arm, only it didn't completely heed Rain's command. Once it reached his arm, it became disobedient and circulated back and forth instead. This was like a child in a rice paddy, strenuously trying to catch a slippery and strong eel, despite all his efforts and using all his might, he could only grab its tail and failed to pull it out of its hole. Rain fell silent. After some contemplation, he guessed this was probably because he was not yet proficient enough with the new Bear King breathing technique. Is there any faster way to increase proficiency than accumulating points? Rain decided to invest some skill points into the new Bear King breathing technique. However, after giving it some thought, he first checked the system notification. You have practiced the Bear King breathing technique. Comprehension has improved. Your skill Bear King breathing technique has advanced. Experience +5. Just 30 minutes had passed, and the Bear King breathing technique had only increased by 5 points, meaning if one practiced the breathing technique for 10 hours a day, it would take 20 days to level it up to LV6. But the crux of the problem is, even for a peak knight's physical capabilities, it is impossible to train in the breathing technique for 10 hours every day. 2 to 3 hours was the limit. Therefore, the actual time span needed would be much longer. Clearly, without special medicine or methods, improving the Bear King breathing technique could only rely on slow and steady progress over time. This time, without hesitation, Rain added 1 skill point to the Bear King breathing technique. On the attribute panel, the remaining skill points went from 6 right arrow 5, while the Bear King breathing technique jumped from LV5 to LV6, 1/3000, as the Bear King breathing technique advanced to LV6. Instantly, a multitude of scattered memories of practicing the Bear King breathing technique were infused into Rain's mind. These fragmented memories of the breathing technique flitted through Rain's mind like a series of images, and were then integrated into the memory of his muscles and fascia as if it were instinct. When Rain opened his eyes again, it felt as though he had undergone half a year of arduous training in the Bear King breathing technique. Now, he could distinctly feel the accelerated circulation of blood throughout his body, as though he were at a blacksmith's forge, hammering iron next to a blazing furnace, while his muscles and fascia became tougher and stronger. But the most important change was inside his body, where the strand of mysterious energy was moving and strengthening at an extremely fast pace. Soon, it had multiplied many times over, changing from a strand to several strands, and finally into a thin wisp. This time, when Rain tried to guide it to the greatsword, it went significantly better. After several attempts, he finally succeeded. This time, the glimmering greatsword suddenly lit up with a barely noticeable faint sparkle. Rain knew that must be what Master Ganther was talking about. Splash! Rain burst out of the water and shouted to Bask on the shore, "Bask, I want to try again. Throw me some tube worms down now." Upon hearing Rain's shout, Bask nodded and said, "All right, Rain." In fact, Bask had been waiting on the shore for quite some time, as he was waiting to see when Rain would start the 4th training task, thinking today might be the day Rain would complete it. Of course, he might fall short by 1 or 2 fish. After all, yesterday Rain had already killed 26 coastal madness fish within an hour. The goal of 30 fish was just within reach. Indeed, it wasn't just Bask who was paying attention to Rain's activities. The moment Rain surfaced and shouted, it also drew the attention of several young people nearby who were also practicing killing coastal madness fish. They all looked sideways, focusing their gaze on Rain above the water. Over the past few days, having seen Rain's increasingly fast killing pace nearing the 30 fish goal, they too wanted to see if this newcomer who hadn't been around for long would complete the 4th training task today. Plub! A tube worm was thrown by Bask into the sea not far from Rain. Suddenly, 4 or 5 coastal madness fish was set in motion by the scent and came charging from the nearby sea with ripples trailing behind, striking at the wriggling tube worm. Seeing this, Rain took a deep breath, operated the Bear King breathing technique, and dived back into the water. This time, however, he chose to take the initiative, swimming towards the incoming coastal madness fish. Heading straight for the fastest and nearest coastal madness fish, Rain struck hard with his dual-handed greatsword, tearing a gash on its tough head, and a trickle of pale red blood seeped out into the ocean. However, since Rain had not managed to activate the wisp of mysterious energy, The damage from this strike was not much different from before. It was only a bit stronger than previous attempts, which was probably because the Bear King breathing technique had advanced to LV6. SHH, next sword strike, still failed to mobilize. The greatsword merely added another deep, bone-showing wound to the coastal madness fish. The third strike. Rain successfully activated it. The glimmering greatsword, with a sliver of light nearly imperceptible, slashed towards the midsection of the berserk fish near the shore. TSSK. Under this blow, the opponent's sturdy scales and subcutaneous exoskeleton provided hardly any trouble for the greatsword carrying the sliver of light, and it cleaved the fish into two. To Rain, it felt as if he had been using a rusty, blunt kitchen knife to cut meat before, but just now, he had switched to a brand new Henkel's kitchen knife. This power gave Rain a shock at first, but immediately after it brought him great joy. You see, it used to take at least 2 minutes for Rain to kill one of these nearshore berserk fish. But now, as soon as he could harness this mysterious energy, he could achieve a one-hit kill. It was simply a qualitative change and improvement, and just now, it took Rain only slightly over 10 seconds to deal with the first berserk fish. Facing the second oncoming berserk fish, Rain felt a hint of excitement because he hadn't even had the time to properly savor that previous strike before it was over. This time, he wanted to truly feel it. In less than 3 minutes, Rain had slain 5 nearshore berserk fish. But in the sea, Rain, holding the greatsword, still looked unsatisfied, as if he was still experiencing the difference. However, Rain's killing efficiency left Bask speechless on the shore. Bask hastily threw another tube worm into the sea. Although Rain had been killing at an extremely fast pace, it was impossible for him to intercept all the berserk fish flocking towards the tube worm. Thus, the last tube worm had already been gobbled up by the fish. However, that was also its last meal because in less than 2 minutes, that berserk fish was killed on the spot by Rain. The other youngsters on the shore, seeing Bask throw a second tube worm into the sea in less than 3 minutes, were all stunned. Beforehand, whether it was Rain or Frode, those on the shore assisting by throwing tube worms would do so at intervals of about 6 or 7 minutes, Frode being slightly slower, around 7 minutes. But this time, Bask threw the second tube worm in less than 3 minutes. Could it be that Rain had just taken about 3 minutes to kill 4 or 5 nearshore berserk fish? That seemed unlikely. Could it be because there were too few berserk fish attracted, only about 3? The onlookers exchanged shocked looks, but they immediately stopped what they were doing and focused their attention to observe how many berserk fish were attracted by the second tube worm Bask threw. 1, 2. This time there were 6. They noted this number silently in their hearts. Next, of course, was to watch Rain's performance. But Rain in the sea had just discovered that the mysterious energy was still unpredictable in its activation, and while its power was substantial during battle, it didn't last long. It had just used the mysterious energy to kill 5 nearshore berserk fish, and it had almost halved this thread of mysterious energy. Meaning, if he continued in the same way, this mysterious energy would be all but consumed. Indeed, after another 3+ minutes, once Rain had killed the second wave of 6 berserk fish, that thread of mysterious energy was completely spent. This time, the people on the shore were dumbstruck. Such killing speed. How could it be so fast? Even the goddess's illegitimate child probably couldn't do better. However, without the boost of the mysterious energy, Rain's killing speed decreased significantly, but it was still no problem for him to meet the objective of 30 nearshore berserk fish within 1 hour. So, Rain continued slaying while silently sensing. He discovered that the genesis of this mysterious energy seemed to stem from his body and that it regenerated rather slowly. Rain estimated that to return to the previous level of energy, he would need almost half a day. Perhaps it might recover faster while he practiced the Bear King breathing technique. But essentially, once depleted in battle, it would likely not recover and be usable again. Thanks to the previous 11 berserk fish as a foundation, Rain managed to kill the target of 30 berserk fish in 48 minutes. When he emerged from the sea, he found that everyone, including Master Ganther, was waiting for him on the shore. Very good, Rain. You have met the requirements of the 4th training task, Master Ganther said, smiling at the soaking wet Rain. Rain smiled back and said, Master, does that mean I can proceed to the next training? No rush. There seems to be a change in your breathing technique. Stabilize it these next few days. Master Ganther smiled but did not agree for Rain to continue with the next training. This. Rain felt helpless. After a moment's thought, Rain still asked, "Master, could you at least introduce the content of the subsequent training tasks?" Hearing this, all the young people around stopped what they were doing and listened intently with their ears perked up. Although Master Ganther found it strange that Rain was eager for the subsequent training, he merely attributed it to Rain's curiosity and didn't think much of it, so he began to introduce the fifth and final training task. I prefer to call this the trial of belief, and moreover, it is not a mandatory training task. However, I have always believed that only by undergoing this trial can one fully comprehend and master the primal strength, said Lagare. Primal strength. That mysterious energy flowing within oneself is what's known as primal strength, but how familiar, as if I've heard of it somewhere before. Jedi Knights, a thought suddenly popped into Rain's head. But truly, it does bear a striking resemblance. It seemed that the concept of primal strength in a blockbuster from a previous life emanated from some extraordinary energy within the body. Master Ganther continued, "If you do not undergo the trial of belief, that's also fine. After returning home, slowly grinding for a few years, you will naturally achieve mastery. The trial of belief simply accelerates this process." Rain understood. The fifth task was very dangerous but also very effective, and it could save years of time. After thinking for a moment, Rain had no hesitation and said, "Master, I want to try. I want to attempt the trial of belief. However, what exactly is the trial of belief?" "To slay the nearby sea serpents," Master Ganther said solemnly, his expression stern. "Yes." Around them rang out a collective gasp of astonishment, especially Basque, who had his eyes wide and an expression of profound shock. Immediately a sea of hushed whispers filled the air. "Sea serpents, those are massive and ferocious beasts. They're comparable to a great knight's combat strength. No matter how strong Rain is, he surely can't match a great knight. Has anyone ever actually completed this trial of belief? It's too difficult." Looking at it this way, the previous 4 tasks are like child's play compared to this. This is the real killer training. Being a native of Golden Coast, Basque was naturally aware of the near sea serpents and had even witnessed their terrifying combat strength firsthand. An adult near sea serpent, once ashore, had the power to destroy an entire human village. The body covered in thick scales the size of a child's fist, their defensive power far exceeded that of the raging sea fish. When normal knights attacked their scales, it was like scratching an itch. Unless equipped with giant crossbow arrows or bronze cannons, the situation called for a great knight to step in, possibly to drive away or kill the beast. Hearing the whispers of the crowd, Master Ganther looked at Rain, noting that his expression remained calm. He nodded slightly, feeling a great sense of approval in his heart. After some thought, Master Ganther said to Rain, "Rain, you must have sensed the primal strength within you by now. But it must be difficult to harness at will, isn't it?" "Yes, Master," Rain nodded and replied, "because only by believing in oneself, having a firm and clear belief, can one freely mobilize it. And for one to have such firm and clear belief, it is very difficult to come by out of thin air. That's why cults like the evil gods rely on prayer ceremonies time and time again to strengthen the believer's faith. In each ceremony, akin to miracles, the faith of believers is established and reinforced. This is also why those cultists are ultimately able to wield the evil gods' immense power. They gave up believing in themselves and instead put their faith in the evil god. As for us, we need to go through tough battle after tough battle, face all kinds of difficult challenges to firm up our own beliefs and purify them. When your faith is unwaveringly strong, you will believe in the sword in your hand and trust that it can cut through anything. If you understand this principle, you can harness the fundamental strength of your body and become one with the sword in your hand." Rain nodded silently without speaking. He understood the purpose of the trial of faith. It was somewhat akin to the barbarian rite of life and death that Lagare had mentioned before. At the brink of life and death, it triggered one's potential, albeit for different reasons. The purpose of Master Ganther's trial of faith was to firm one's belief so they could freely use the Force. The purpose of the previous 4 training exercises was indeed to prepare for the trial of faith, to improve the chances of success. Rain thought to himself. However, Rain, don't think about the trial of faith for now. What you need to do is first stabilize your breathing technique. After 1 month, once you've adjusted and are ready, we'll undertake this final task." Master Ganther said with a smile. "Master Ganther, could I choose to go kill the sea serpent near the coast in 3 days?" Rain said, steeling himself. He certainly understood Master Ganther's intentions, and he knew that his arrangements were most sensible. But, Ganther's brows evidently furrowed, his expression displeased. Finding a promising young talent so hard to come by, he had just spoken at length, his main point being his hope for Rain to proceed methodically. 3 days. What can be done in 3 days? There wouldn't even be enough time to stabilize a new breathing technique. Not to mention, allowing the new breathing technique to gradually enhance one's strength and speed and other physical conditions, thus accumulating enough foundation to challenge the trial of faith. Heading out now to fight the sea serpent near the coast, the risk would be almost several times greater than if he waited a month. And the people around, upon hearing Rain's words, mostly went from looking at him with admiration or respect to an expression that said, "Rain, are you getting carried away?" as they looked at him. A few who couldn't hold back murmured softly, "What's Rain thinking to be so impatient?" I originally thought Rain was a very steady person, but I didn't expect. Yes, this is the first time I've seen Master Ganther talk so much. Rain seems rather ungrateful. Rain also knew that by making this request, he would certainly make Master Ganther have a somewhat negative impression of him, but he had no choice, he was running out of time. "Master Ganther, because in 3 days I have to leave this place and return to Meister County. So, I don't want to leave with regrets. Besides, please believe me, I won't take my life as a joke." Rain looked at Master Ganther and spoke earnestly. Master Ganther, after hearing what Rain had said, did not immediately respond, but stared at Rain for a while before finally nodding and saying, "Good." With Master Ganther's approval, everyone else immediately fell silent, no longer whispering anything. "Rain, come with me." After saying this, Master Ganther led Rain to a secluded area. Everyone watched enviously as Rain and Master Ganther walked away. They could guess that most likely, the Master was going to impart some secret techniques or killer moves to Rain, or perhaps some arcane knowledge. But now, they did not even have the privilege of listening in. So, Master Ganther had moved away from them. This made most of the young people present feel somewhat deflated. After a while, a young man with a crew cut named Frode snapped out of it and said solemnly, "Let's go. Everyone continue to train diligently. Yes, don't feel discouraged. Everyone has different talents. You have to believe that you can also succeed." "Didn't the Master just say it? Believe in yourself," another young man said, waving his clenched fist, his face flushing red as if to encourage himself. "Sigh, easy to say, but seeing someone like Rain really is disheartening," lamented another young man named Archero. The others nodded vigorously. "Yes, the gap is too big, it really is disheartening. At least we see the difference between ourselves and a genius, right? It gives us more reason to work harder," said another young man named Doug, his eyes resolute as he spoke softly. Rain did not know that, even in the eyes of these talented youths, he was already considered a genius. Master Ganther took Rain to a slightly elevated rock, facing the vast and boundless blue sea. The sea wind made their coats rustle. "Rain, I originally thought about discussing this matter with you later, but since you chose to challenge the seaside serpent dragon in 3 days, I think it's necessary to tell you now. I've already mentioned that the insight between life and death is essential to fully harnessing the primal force, which is a necessary condition for faith integration. You must be curious because I haven't explained why one should seek full mastery of the primal force. In fact, I advised most people to give up the trial of faith and simply return to refine their skills slowly." At this point, Rain frowned lightly and nodded, having had this doubt himself. For most people, being able to invoke the primal force by over 90% is already sufficient for a lifetime, Master Ganther said, turning to look at Rain. "But you are different. You have the potential to go further. So I hope you can achieve full integration and complete control of your primal force, because this involves the emergence of the Will's Radiance." "Will's Radiance?" Rain asked, puzzled. Master Ganther did not elaborate further but simply remarked, "You'll understand later. Your next read awaits at Empire, all right." Rain was quite helpless with Master Ganther's habit of speaking in riddles. Although there are only 3 days left, you still need to stabilize the new breathing technique, and for your current condition, the fundamental attributes such as strength and speed are still very important. Don't slacken your training. Primal force is not born out of nothing, it stems from your own physique, Master Ganther advised. "I understand, thank you for your guidance, Master," Rain nodded and said. Back at the stone house, Rain reflected on the scene of when he had upgraded his new breathing technique underwater. When he advanced the Bear King breathing method to LV6 first, the intensity of his primal force increased, from a wisp to a strand, showing a significant improvement. Next, there was control. From the original one successful invocation out of 3 or 4 attempts, nearly 1 in 3, to almost 1 in 2 now. No wonder Master Ganther said that the last training session was optional for many people. If one does not strive for integration, for full manipulation of the primal force, then many can return and gradually enhance their control over several years, ultimately achieving about 90% success rate. But his case was different. He had a cheat. He must aim for a 100% invocation of the primal force, especially since the master mentioned that it relates to the future path, although he still did not know what Will's radiance meant. So spending years just to refine this skill, but not achieving perfection, was definitely not his choice. And through attribute points, he could quickly restore himself to physical peak condition. Having a trump card akin to miracles, especially best suited for turning the tables in desperate situations. Last of all, Rain touched the beautiful tree leaf given to him by the elf lady, the sorcery scroll, Blossom of Life. During this period of exploration, Rain had understood that this was a sorcery scroll for healing wounds. Thus, even if he was severely injured in battle, he still had the chance to turn the tide against adversity. With these methods in hand, Rain felt that no one else could claim to be more suited to turning the tables than himself. However, should I continue to add points, or is it about fine for now? Given I am soon to face a sea serpent neck dragon comparable to a great knight, it's better not to take it lightly. Feeling the brink of life and death does spur growth, but the purpose is for you to feel it, not to actually seek death. What's the point if you feel it just before death? Facing life and death, forcing faith to fuse fully, thereby mobilizing the source force. Thus seeking life in death, this is the true meaning of the trial by faith. Lastly, it's about increasing the success rate of mobilizing the source force to the highest possible level, turning it into the final layer of paper window, which would then make breaking through much easier and quicker. Rain mused, talking to himself. Having made up his mind, Rain did not hesitate any longer, choosing to add points again. As the remaining skill points on the attribute panel decreased from 5 to 4, the giant bear breathing technique suddenly leveled up from LV6 to LV7, 1/5000. Instantly, a rush of fragmented memories about the new breathing technique was infused into Rain's mind. These fragmented memories of the breathing technique, like a series of slideshows, flashed through Rain's mind one by one, and then quickly integrated into the memory of his muscles and fascia. Your journey continues on Empire. When Rain opened his eyes again, it was as if he had undergone over a year of training in the giant bear breathing technique. At this moment, apart from feeling his muscles and fascia becoming much tougher, the strand of source force within him was rapidly strengthening. The source force soon thickened notably, growing from a wisp as thin as 3 or 4 hairs to one as thick as a toothpick. This enhancement was visible to the naked eye. Adding points really packs a punch. Compared to others, I just saved a year's worth of painstaking training. Rain, with a joyful expression, began to try guiding the source force again. Sure enough, after some attempts, the success rate was noticeably better. The success rate of mobilizing the source force increased from less than half to about 60%. 60%. Rain couldn't help but pontificate again. Before long, Rain gritted his teeth and added points to the new breathing technique again. As the remaining skill points on the attribute panel decreased from 4 to 3, the giant bear breathing technique instantly leveled up to LV 8, 1/7000, becoming Rain's highest level skill at present. A flood of nearly 2 years' worth of memories about training in the giant bear breathing technique began to pour into Rain's mind. The strand of source force, previously as thick as a toothpick, now quickly strengthened to the thickness of chopsticks. The feeling of getting stronger is really great. Rain felt the surge of power in his body. The ongoing enhancement of his body's muscles and fascia became even more intense. The originally thin fascia fibers began to grow thicker and stronger, linking increasingly firmly with Rain's skeletal muscles. Suddenly, Rain's eyes widened dramatically, because he felt an inner part of his body suddenly make a bang sound. And he had broken through some sort of limit. It was like the feeling of a bowstring being pulled to its limit and then being forced further until the bowstring suddenly snapped. At that moment, 2 system notifications suddenly appeared. Congratulations, your strength attribute has been enhanced. Congratulations, your agility attribute has been enhanced. a major increase in breathing technique leading to physical enhancement. This hasn't happened in a long while, Rain exclaimed. However, logically, the first to enhance should be the Constitution attribute. Considering the giant bear breathing technique primarily strengthens Constitution, how did agility increase? Rain felt puzzled and couldn't help but check the attribute panel. He found that although Constitution had not increased, it had reached 21 points. Strength, which was previously 19 points, had increased by 1 point, reaching 20 points, thus crossing into the 20-point range for both attributes. Meanwhile, agility remained the lowest. Before the increase, agility should have been 17 points, the weakest attribute, so it must have been boosted by the enhancement of the giant bear breathing technique. Rain pondered. Yes, that must be it. It's also possible that the new giant bear breathing technique doesn't have the weak link of the previous giant bear breathing technique, which was biased towards enhancing strength and constitution, and instead boosts all three attributes nearly equally. Elated, Rain tried to mobilize the source force again. Soon, Rain discovered that the success rate of mobilizing the source force had now increased to about 80%. Just then, Rain felt a strong sensation of hunger suddenly emerge within his body. Continual point additions indeed significantly increased the total amount of source force. But this newly added source force was not created out of nothing but derived from Rain's own body, which was now significantly drained. Fortunately, the numerous sea madfish Rain had killed over the past 7 days had already been processed by Basque into grilled fish jerky, some stored inside the stone house, others still drying. Rain immediately rummaged for it and started devouring large bites. After eating 17 grilled madfish jerkies, Rain finally felt a sense of fullness in his stomach. After all, this was flesh from sea madfish comparable to ferocious beasts, which was quite filling. At this moment, Rain folded his arms and rubbed his chin in thought. Now it's an 80% probability. If I add just one more point, wouldn't that be close to the limit? Glancing at the remaining skill points on the panel, Rain pondered and decided to try adding one more point. After all, casting a long-range witchcraft attack every second is still a long way off. By that time, he might have already accumulated enough skill points again. Thus, Rain added another point. With the remaining skill points on the attribute panel changing from 3 to 2, the Bear King breathing technique surged to LV9, 1/10,000. A flood of memories on how to train in the Bear King breathing technique rushed into Rain's mind. Meanwhile, a strand of primal force as thick as a chopstick inside his body quickly became as thick as a pinky finger. What Rain was most concerned about, the success rate of harnessing primal force, had increased to more than 90%, missing just by a sliver the point of perfection. But that sliver could only be achieved amidst life and death. At that moment, 3 system notifications suddenly appeared. Congratulations, your Constitution attribute has increased. Congratulations, your Strength attribute has increased. Congratulations, your Agility attribute has increased. Yes, leveling up just by adding points, seriously awesome. Rain looked at the attribute panel and, including the 2 previous points, this made for a total of 5 attribute points increase. Name: Rain Carlin. Occupation: Wizard Apprentice. Transcendent LV4 345/1000/Knight. Transcendent LV4 866/1000/Beast Tamer. Transcendent LV5 64/2000/Armorer. LV1 17/100. Constitution 22 Strength, 21 Agility, 19 Spirit, 25 remaining attribute points, 2 remaining skill points. 2 Feeling the power surging inside him, Rain had the sense that he could slay a small plesiosaur with a mere wave of his hand. Of course, Rain knew that this was merely an illusion caused by the rapid increase in his own strength. And it made sense. He had leveled up the Bear King breathing technique all the way to LV9. It better be impressive. 3 days flashed by. Early in the morning on the 3rd day, Master Ganther looked at Rain, and immediately his pupils contracted. Then his gaze repeatedly sizing up Rain with a slight look of surprise. After circling around Rain a few times, Master Ganther said, "What a rare talent for a knight, Rain. A new breathing technique has stabilized so quickly." This remark startled Rain, but thankfully, Rain quickly realized that Master Ganther, after all, wasn't a clairvoyant. He could only tell that Rain's aura was stable and had increased somewhat, but couldn't determine exactly how much. It seems I still shouldn't add too many skill points at once. Or perhaps it's better to wait a while before adding points next time. After all, the magnitude of one's personal strength increase from consecutive additions of points is still a bit exaggerated, Rain thought to himself. Follow me. Master Ganther, after expressing his amazement, said to Rain and began leading the way toward a small boat at the shore. Rain immediately followed quickly. It was a small boat about 3 to 4 meters long, shaped like a canoe with both ends curved upwards, with paddles at one end, and Basque was already waiting on it, waving excitedly upon seeing Master Ganther and Rain. After all, Rain was going to challenge the nearby plesiosaur this time. After both of them got on the boat, Basque started rowing, heading slowly in the southwest direction. Basque explained to Rain while rowing, right under that island in front, there is a nest of a nearshore plesiosaur. Ever since Master Ganther arrived, it has never dared to come close to the coast, which has made the residents of Randonia town very happy. Originally, this nearshore plesiosaur would occasionally come to Randonia town to cause trouble. Even though it rarely caused casualties, it would provoke panic, which troubled my father greatly. Rain nodded, looking up to see indeed several islands stretching in a line, and following the direction Basque pointed, it should be the slightly larger island in the middle. Soon, the boat gently reached the island, and the three of them jumped off. After walking a short distance, they reached the bottom of a jagged cliff, where Master Ganther stopped and said, "The plesiosaur is here." Rain felt a bit puzzled as he looked around. It was all rocks with no visible caves or places to hide. But quickly, an idea flashed in his mind, and he said, "Master, is the entrance underwater?" Master Ganther smiled approvingly at Rain, saying, "Exactly, it's under the water. Just dive down here and you'll find it. Go on, believe in yourself." Rain nodded. Rain leaped and plunged into the sea. At that moment, Basque, standing beside, showed a worried expression and said, "Master, can Rain really handle it? That's a nearshore plesiosaur comparable to a great knight." "I have confidence in him," Master Ganther responded with a smile and then slowly made his way into the sea as well. "Master, what are you doing? Continue your journey on Empire." Master Ganther turned, giving Basque a look as if he were looking at an imbecile. "Of course I have to watch from nearby in the cave. This is training, naturally there are final safety measures. But this isn't something we can tell them in advance, otherwise, this trial of conviction would be meaningless." "Ah," Basque's eyes went wide, slightly stunned, "so I've been worrying over nothing." By then, Rain had already found the entrance to the underwater cave, through a U-shaped channel covered with tough seagrass, and soon, Rain discovered that inside was a whole new world. On a sandy beach within the cave, a massive creature lay in deep slumber. The creature's body was about 14 or 15 meters long, with thick scales the size of a palm covering its skin. Its most distinctive feature was a long, snake-like neck and a body akin to that of a turtle, giving the impression of a snake carrying a turtle shell on its back. Additionally, each limb of the nearby plesiosaur ended in flat, paddle-like structures. Its head was small in relation to its body, merely the size of a basin, yet it possessed fine, sharp teeth and a hard beak. Moreover, Rain observed a long sword wound on the creature's side. If he wasn't mistaken, this must have been left by Master Ganther. However, judging by the destructive power of the wound, it seemed that Master Ganther could have easily killed the plesiosaur. Hence, the reason for leaving it alive must have been for training purposes. Rain looked around and found no shelter to hide his tracks, so sneaking up directly seemed to be the only option. If a surprise attack succeeded, that would be for the best. If not, it didn't matter, as Rain focused and held his breath, making his way slowly through the water toward the beach at the end of the cave. A number of swordfish swimming near the shallows seemed to have detected Rain's presence, swimming over to him and quickly circling a few times. The next second, the plesiosaur, which had been soundly asleep, suddenly opened its eyes as large as goose eggs and looked towards Rain. In an instant, a majestic aura burst forth from the plesiosaur, although Rain couldn't immediately understand why he had awakened the creature. But that was okay. His original intention was to have a fierce battle with the plesiosaur, so whether it was awake or asleep, he didn't care much. Break the limit. Huge strength LV3, strength burst. Having reached the shore, Rain suddenly burst forth at full strength, brandishing his greatsword and charging at the plesiosaur. The plesiosaur, which had not taken Rain, little thing, seriously at first, began to move its body only when it saw the little thing suddenly grow by 2 sizes and radiate a faint sense of threat. Although the plesiosaur appeared cumbersome, it moved swiftly, but still seemed to be slightly too late. PFFFT. Empowered by his momentum, Rain's sword directly severed the plesiosaur's right forelimb. The palm leaf-sized right forelimb fell onto the sandy beach, with blood splattering from the wound. Roar! The plesiosaur let out a tragic scream, but in a flash, the warning bell of Rain's level 3 danger perception sounded, and a thick, snake-like dark shadow struck Rain like lightning. Rain raised his sword to block. Bang! In an instant, Rain was knocked back 7 or 8 meters by the immense strength, flipping in the air to dissipate the force before stabilizing once again. He saw that the shadow was the plesiosaur's tail. Its tail now had 7 or 8 palm-sized scales shattered. After receiving pain twice in a row, the plesiosaur seemed to become enraged. Its relatively small eyes fiercely locked onto Rain. The next second, it bent its long neck backward like a drawn bow. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The plesiosaur's neck trembled violently, and its sharp beak shot towards Rain like lightning. Rain hastily rolled to the side to dodge the strike. But to his surprise, the plesiosaur's special move turned out to be a triple attack. The second strike blocked by the greatsword. Clang! The clash of beak and sword emitted a sound like the striking of metal. Rain's entire body was smashed into the sand, half buried and unable to move. Then the third strike arrived. At this moment, Rain's defensive stance had already been disrupted by the 2 consecutive hits from the serpent-necked dragon. Although he still held the glimmering greatsword in a blocking position, his defensive power had greatly diminished. Facing a serpent-necked dragon whose strength could rival that of a great knight, Rain knew that taking a direct hit, even with his transcendent trait Iron Skin LV3, would leave him either dead or crippled. In the blink of an eye, Rain felt an unprecedented sense of crisis, something he had never experienced before. But at the same time, this intense sense of crisis also forced Rain's entire spirit to concentrate to an extreme degree. No way to dodge, enjoy new tales from Empire should he trust the sword in his hand, as Master Ganther had said. In that instant, Rain had no other thoughts, his eyes fixed on the charging serpent-necked dragon, and he roared. Huh? Instead of defending, Rain lashed out with his greatsword toward the approaching serpent-necked dragon's head. Under the full eruption of his power, the greatsword emitted a faint glow. For a moment, the tip of the sword seemed to elongate slightly, like a snake spitting out its tongue. There was nothing tangible, but Rain felt as though the sword in his hand could cut through everything. Was this invisible power a sword light, or sword energy? Whatever it was, its power was peerless. Pacha, in the disbelieving gaze of the sea serpent, its incredibly hard beak was split open, and then it found that it could see its other eye. Blood gushed out like a fountain, shooting 2 meters high. And only then did the serpent-necked dragon, its head split in 2, crash to the ground. At that moment, system promotions began to pop up like rapid fire. Your skilled giant bear sword technique has been enhanced. Experience plus 1,452. You have gone through a battle. Knight, Transcendent, experience plus 382. Congratulations, your Knight, Transcendent profession level has increased. Due to the continuous killing of nearshore frenzied fish over the past 7 days, Rain's Knight profession level was already on the cusp of breaking through, and this time killing the nearshore serpent-necked dragon brought a substantial amount of experience. Thus his Knight Transcendent level smoothly increased, reaching Knight Transcendent LV5 218/2000. Leveling up granted him 1 skill point and 1 attribute point, bringing Rain's remaining skill points back up to 3, and his remaining attribute points were now also 3. Unexpectedly, the system prompt began to rapidly flash again. Ding! It has been detected that the host has enough firm belief in the sword in hand, and the control over original power has reached 100%, triggering a special profession change Sword Master, Transcendent. The prerequisites for changing to Sword Master Transcendent are 1. The belief in the sword. 2. Original power control reaching 100%. 3. Any extraordinary swordsmanship at LV6 or above. 4. Any breath technique at LV6 or above. 5. Strength at 12 points or above, agility at 12 points or above, constitution at 12 points or above. All current conditions are met. All prerequisites for changing to Sword Master Transcendent are met. Do you want to change to Sword Master Transcendent? Yes/no. Warning: once you choose to change to Sword Master Transcendent, spiritual power will gradually solidify, which conflicts with the requirement for activating spirit power as the current Wizard Apprentice Transcendent profession. This process is irreversible. Please decide carefully. It was the first time Rain saw the word warning in a system prompt. This couldn't help but make him fall into deep thought. From the system warning, Rain knew that the key issue must be related to spiritual power, with the critical difference being between solidification and activation. Thinking about it, Rain soon realized that it probably had to do with the way of the swordsman, where pursuing an extreme attack power with the sword necessitated the solidification of spiritual power. That's right, Master Ganther had talked about the glory of will before, Rain murmured. Could solidification of spiritual power be a necessary step or condition to create the glory of will? After some thought, he shook his head. He wasn't very familiar with the way of the swordsman. It was merely a speculation. However, one thing he was sure about was that he was now at the peak of being a second-level wizard. Apprentice about to step into the third level, so he vaguely felt something about the Path of Wizards. That was, one of the essential requirements for the Path of Wizards must be the activation of spiritual power to manipulate various mysterious side energy particles. Thus, the professions of wizards and swordsmen seem to be incompatible, suggesting entirely different paths. Clearly, the path of the swordsman could also have a promising future, as seen from Master Ganther. However, Master Ganther was probably not just a swordsman but something beyond that, a greater swordsman, Rain speculated. No matter what it was called, being a swordsman indeed meant possessing extremely high attack capabilities. For the ultimate profession, Rain blindly guessed, could it possibly be something like Sword Saint? You can't have the best of both worlds. What a pity. For Rain, a person who had crossed into this world, the mysterious and unfathomable path of wizards held special significance, so he had to give up on the path of the swordsman for now, perhaps. There might be a chance in the future. I wonder if high-level witchcraft includes dummies, split bodies, or something of the sort, which might not entirely close off the possibility. Standing in front of the corpse of the sea serpent, Rain's thoughts were racing at this moment. Meanwhile, Master Ganther was nearby, in the seawater at the outermost part of the cave, but he was in a state of shock, which was extremely rare for him. A few minutes earlier, before he had entered the cave, he had felt a sudden tremor from within the cave. At that moment, he was shocked and thought, how could Rain suddenly become so reckless? He just came in and immediately battled the sea serpent without observing carefully. This made him accelerate his pace in the passage, but when he emerged from the water ready to rescue, he was stunned. Because what he saw was the corpse of the sea serpent, comparable in strength to a great knight, lying in a pool of blood. At fast 30 seconds, it took him quite a while to come back to his senses. Rain had already finished off the sea serpent. Although he had previously tried to assess Rain as highly as possible, in the end, Master Ganther found that he had still underestimated him. Ahem, Master Ganther coughed, which instantly drew the attention of Rain, who was deeply in thought on the shore. Rain quickly turned his head, first startled, but then, upon recognizing Master Ganther, immediately showed a look of joy. Master, what brings you here? Suddenly, Rain realized something. The trial of conviction was the 5th training task arranged by Master Ganther, and since it was training, it would not truly put the apprentice at risk of dying. What was special about the trial of conviction, however, was that its purpose was to let the apprentice feel on the brink of death, thereby inspiring conviction, fully mobilizing the primal force, and seeking survival from death. Obviously, this meant that Master Ganther could not tell his apprentice in advance, I am actually following you and will protect you. Therefore, Master Ganther must have followed into the underwater cave shortly after entering himself to avoid genuinely dying at the jaws of the sea serpent. Realizing this, Rain felt a warmth in his heart. As for if the master saw his triple-state appearance with swollen muscles, it didn't matter. Rain had already thought of a reason that could be attributed to his transcendent trait, huge strength. His transcendent trait was just powerful. I was intending to protect you, but it seems my worry was unnecessary, Master Ganther said, confirming Rain's guess. By the way, how did you kill this sea serpent? Master Ganther approached the serpent, circled the body lying in a pool of blood, and began to examine the cause of death. Upon discovering that the serpent had died from a sword stroke that split its skull, a gleam suddenly flickered in his eyes. This was, Master, just now when I was slaying the serpent. Facing a life and death crisis. It was so sudden, I mobilized all my primal forces and channeled them into the greatsword in my hand. I originally thought that one strike would get me out of trouble, but to my surprise, I managed to split open the hardest part of its beak and even the head into 2 halves. Rain expressed his doubts, taking the opportunity to ask since Master Ganther had brought it up. He also wanted to know exactly what had happened with that strike. Because just a moment ago, after killing the sea serpent, he tried a few more times. Although mobilizing the primal force was effortless, it seemed that the power was significantly different compared to that strike. Experience more on Empire. Rain, you have surprised me again. How about it? Are you interested in staying to pursue the path of the Sword Saint? Master Ganther did not directly answer Rain's question, but instead invited him with a smile. Sword Saint? Rain's eyes suddenly widened as he looked at the other person. So it really is the Sword Saint. Turns out, Master Ganther was semi-retired at the Golden Coast to pursue the path of the Sword Saint. However, Master, this path is incompatible with that of a wizard. Rain cried in his heart. Although he liked the high attack power of the Sword Saint's path, his current situation only allowed him to refuse. Master, thank you for your appreciation, but for now, I wish to travel first. Perhaps one day when I can calm my heart, I will come back to the Golden Coast and seek your guidance. Rain bowed deeply and said earnestly, Good, young people should indeed go out and see more. Pursuing swordsmanship also requires an undistracted mind. Hearing what Rain had said, Master Ganther thought for a moment, nodded his head, and seemed to agree. Master Ganther did not persuade Rain to stay any longer, but turned to explain the sword strike Rain had just made. That sword strike of yours had actually combined your belief in the sword with the primal force. In simple terms, this is known as sword glow, a capability that only swordmasters can wield. Essentially, it was your belief in the sword infused within the primal force. In that instant, ordinary primal force transformed into sword primal force, thus possessing a destructive power stronger than ordinary primal force. I see, thank you, Master, for clarifying. Rain bowed slightly in gratitude. Sword primal force, huh? Sure enough, just as he had speculated, the path of the swordsman, great sword master, and sword saint is indeed closely linked to the sword, ultimately aiming perhaps to pursue the sword's ultimate destructive power. By the way, Master Ganther, are we heading back now? Hold on. This adult nearshore plesiosaur is a treasure trove. Being a large, ferocious marine beast, one could say it is full of treasures. Master Ganther said with a smile, especially its heart, which can now be used to make beast essence, a magic potion essential for a knight's promotion to Great Knight. Advancing to Great Knight? Rain's eyes suddenly lit up. Originally, after this trip, he was going to seek information about the knight's further advancement processes. He had thought of asking Hamilton, but later felt his progress was too shocking and decided to delay it for a while. Unexpectedly, he had heard relevant information from Master Ganther. Noticing Rain's astonished look, Master Ganther thought that Rain was startled by the word beast and explained with a smile. Haha, why, do you think the plesiosaur doesn't deserve to be called a beast? Actually, beast is just our term for ferocious wild animals longer than 10 meters. Its heart contains a special substance that, when refined by a pharmacist into beast essence, can complement the huge consumption required for a knight's promotion to Great Knight. Beast essence. Listening to this, it seems somewhat similar conceptually to the advancement magic potions used by ordinary people stepping into the Knight Transcendent stage. Just wondering if it has various subdivisions and specifics like the advancement magic potions, Rain thought to himself. Just as Rain was about to continue his inquiries with Master Ganther, suddenly the system notification resurfaced. Ding! Host has listened to Transcendent Secrets, triggering Advancement Profession Great Knight Transcendent. Advancing to Great Knight Transcendent prerequisites are 1. Physical limit value reaching 100%, 2. Any breathing method LV9 or above, 3. Strength 20 points or more, Agility 20 points or more, Constitution 20 points or more, 4. Any close combat Transcendent Combat Skill LV 9 or higher, 5. High-grade Magic Potion Beast Essence. Current conditions do not meet. Advancement to Great Knight Transcendent failed. Reading the system notification that popped up suddenly several times, Rain was excited. He hadn't expected that after just missing the occupation change to swordsman, he would receive promotion information for stepping into Great Knight Transcendent after listening to Master Ganther's secrets about beast essence and primal force. It felt truly like when one door closes, another opens. Looking at the conditions, Great Knight Transcendent and Knight Transcendent can be said to be of the same lineage, with many similar prerequisites. Although Great Knight seems a bit weaker in battle power, compared to professions like Swordsman and Greatsword Master with extreme attack power. Its path does not conflict with that of a wizard, considering dual classing is the primary thing to consider. Moreover, the conditions for advancing to Great Knight he was close to or had already met. For example, Condition 1 physical limit value reaching 100%, Rain checked the Knight, Transcendent panel, and the limit value had reached 95%. This was due to the consecutive enhancements of Bear King breathing technique earlier, which had incrementally added 5 attribute points. And at the moment, there were still 3 remaining attribute points on the panel. There was no need to waste skill points, as it was merely a matter of when he would add the points to reach the 100% limit value. Also, Condition 2 any breathing method LV9 he had already achieved. Indeed, investing in breathing techniques was not in vain. As for Condition 3, just as Rain was drifting into thought, Master Ganther spoke up. "Let's go, Rain. We need to quickly handle the plesiosaur's heart while it's fresh." "Yes, Master," Rain immediately responded. Experience Tales at Empire. When Rain emerged from the sea, dragging the enormous corpse of the plesiosaur, Basque was utterly stunned. "Rain, you succeeded so soon, or is this?" Basque turned his head to look at Master Ganther. Master Ganther understood Basque's meaning. Basque was asking if it was he who had helped Rain kill the near-shore plesiosaur. Master Ganther shook his head and said, "It was Rain who killed it alone." "Basque, don't just stand there. The blood of the plesiosaur will attract many other ferocious sea beasts. Hurry back." "All right, Master." Although Basque agreed outright, his expression still betrayed his surprise as he bound the corpse of the plesiosaur to the rear side of the boat and began to row rapidly. Yet as he rowed, Basque's gaze kept alternating between the huge plesiosaur corpse bobbing in the water and the calm-faced Rain on the boat, and his heart was filled with inexplicable shock. By the time the 3 reached the shore of the island, Rain noticed that a group of 7 or 8 young men, led by the crew Cut Frode, were waiting at the seaside. Experience more content on Empire clearly, they had received the news and were waiting for the outcome. Just as a young man named Archero was about to speak up, suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he saw the massive body floating behind the boat and involuntarily blurted out, Is this a success?" Before Rain could answer, Basque, who had just jumped ashore, slightly raised his chin with pride and said, "That's right. Rain succeeded. Look, there lies the corpse of the plesiosaur. Everyone help out and lift it up first." Instantly, the gaze of all the young people present focused on Rain with varying expressions of shock and disbelief. When everyone saw the cause of death of the huge near-shore plesiosaur's corpse after it was lifted onto the shore, their expressions grew even more astonished as their eyes went back and forth between Rain and the plesiosaur. They seemed shocked as to why there was not a single wound on Rain's body. How had he killed such a large, ferocious sea beast unscathed? What kind of strength was this? That was just too frightening. Half an hour later, Rain packed away the wooden box containing the enormous heart of the near-shore plesiosaur and placed it on the brown horse. This was something that Master Ganther had helped him process and given to him as a gift. As for the other parts of the near-shore plesiosaur, such as scales, outer skin, and meat, Rain left them as a token of gratitude. "Master, I am now ready to leave. Thank you for your guidance during this time," Rain said to Master Ganther, bowing respectfully. Although Rain and Master Ganther's acquaintance had started with an introduction letter from Clea, by now it was hard to say if Rain weighed more in Master Ganther's heart than Clea did. Master Ganther smiled reassuringly and said, "Go back. Your road ahead is still long, and perhaps before long I will be hearing about your deeds." The other young men, including Frode and Doug, also took turns bidding farewell to Rain. Rain smiled and nodded his head in response. Although he hadn't communicated much with the others during his nearly 20 days here, so their relationships couldn't be said to be good or bad, with Master Ganther as a mutual connection. Perhaps, when they met outside, he should lend them a hand. Meanwhile, Basque enthusiastically helped Rain place his luggage onto the brown horse, saying, "Rain, I'll walk you to the main road." Rain nodded his head, and then he turned around once more and said to Master Ganther and the others, "Master, everyone, I hope we can meet again." The crowd watched as Rain's figure gradually disappeared down the path, their faces filled with emotion. "Master Ganther, Rain must be the fastest of all the trainees since your retirement, right?" the crew-cut youth Frode asked curiously all of a sudden. Master Ganther, with a smile, did not directly answer Frode's question but instead encouraged, "There are far more geniuses in this world than you can imagine. Keep pushing yourselves." Walking along the path, Rain did not immediately mount his horse but led the black horse forward. with Bask by his side, helping him lead the brown horse that was carrying the luggage. "By the way, Rain, on your way back, it's best to stick to the main roads and avoid the paths," Bask said, seemingly recalling something, his expression turning serious. "Recently, the area around Rossby County has been unsafe, with several incidents of nobles' carriages or lone knights being attacked and killed by bands of bandits," he added. "Bandits?" Rain echoed back. "Yes, according to my father's information, it seems that these bands of bandits are backed by Zaral's rebels. So Rain, be careful on your journey, don't take them lightly as mere bandits," Bask warned. "Thank you, Bask, I'll be careful," Rain graciously thanked the youth for his friendly warning. On the other hand, Rain's mind stirred at the mention. Zaral's rebels, eh? He immediately thought of the time he had rescued Hass, where those people seemed to be bandits from the area on the surface. He also recalled the battle at the rebel stronghold in Meister County. The rebels not only had some hidden connections with several bandit groups in the surrounding area, but the rebels themselves often posed as bandit groups, engaging in plundering. It seemed the activity of this so-called rebel group had been increasing lately. Moreover, judging from the region, it seems that the enemy's activity in Rossby County is much higher compared to that in Meister County, although the insurgents I've encountered before were not very strong, with the strongest among them being a peak knight only. However, a rebellion of such a large scale must inevitably include masters of the great knight level, and I indeed cannot afford to take them lightly." At that moment, Bask suddenly slapped his forehead with an enlightened look, bursting into laughter. "Almost forgot, Rain, you're the man who solo killed the sea serpent. If the rebels encountered you, what they should be worried about is themselves." Haha, upon hearing Bask's words, Rain couldn't help but smile too. "Bask, this is far enough, remember to contact me when you have time, or you can come find me in Meister County," Rain turned and said to Bask. Thanks to the time they had spent together, and not to mention Bask being a good person who also offered Rain several small favors, their relationship had become quite harmonious. "All right, Rain, that. Rain, could you deliver a message to Lady Clea for me?" Bask rubbed his hands together, looking somewhat embarrassed. What message?" Rain looked at Bask somewhat puzzled. "Well, when you see Lady Clea, could you ask her if she remembers Bask from the Golden Coast? I hope she can make time to come to the Golden Coast again and visit Master Ganther," Bask said with a touch of shyness. "That, sure, if I get the chance to see her," Rain said, a bit speechless. Bask's sheepish demeanor was just like that of a bashful young girl, and seeing such a thing on a big burly man was truly something that left one speechless. "Asking Lady Clea to visit Master Ganther. Is it not that you want to see Clea yourself, but you're worried she might refuse, so you phrased it like that, right? Also, Bask from the Golden Coast. What kind of expression is that? Why does it sound so much like the phrase Summer Lotus by the Daming Lake from my previous life?" Rain stopped dwelling on it further and lightly shook his head, then turned to mount his horse, waving his hand and saying, "I'm off, Bask. Goodbye, Rain." Bask watched Rain's departing figure, lost in a trance. At that moment, the warm winter sunlight cast long shadows over Rain, who was riding away with 2 horses, giving Bask a feeling as if the path Rain was heading towards was aglow with golden light, a road leading to the divine realm. Explore more stories with Empire since he hadn't received any messages from the blue-helmeted pigeons. Rain assumed that his family and the Crowley clan in Meister County probably hadn't encountered any troublesome problems. With that in mind, Rain decided to pay a visit to Hass on his way back. Rain had quite a fruitful near 20-day stay at the Golden Coast, so he was in a very good mood. The Richmond fishing port, where Hass was located, was just north of the Golden Coast, and north was exactly the direction Rain was headed. It was totally on the way. Rain estimated that if he didn't take a detour and traveled through the forest path, he should be able to reach the Richmond fishing port by evening. Stewed giant thorn salmon, huh? Rain thought of the last time Hass mentioned his hometown's specialty delicacy, which brought a smile to his face. Around noon, Rain found a spot to rest in a forest by the road. While taking out some roasted madfish jerky from his sack and munching away, he also pondered the essence power. Along the way, Rain had found through repeated trials that although he could now manipulate the essence power with ease and unleash all of it in a burst, the power from the strike that killed the sea serpent eluded him. Master Ganther had explained this issue. Without a life and death crisis and a lack of strong conviction, one can't transform essence power into sword energy with more destructive force. The tier of sword energy seemed very high. utterly different from the common sharpness enhancement when essence power is attached to a sword. The former had immense power, but seemed to involve the solidification of spiritual power, while the latter was much less powerful and seemed to be merely a shallow application of primal force. However, what Rain was considering now was a different issue. If I attach primal force to the sword, the effect is to increase the edge's sharpness. So what happens if I attach primal force to a hammer? It can't possibly increase the sharpness of the hammer, right? After all, one end of the hammer is flat. So when I attach primal force to the sword, what exactly am I thinking? As Rain pondered, he took the greatsword off his back. He began to wield the glimmering greatsword while channeling primal force. After practicing the giant bear sword technique for a while, suddenly a flash of insight crossed Rain's mind, and he seemed to understand. At that moment, a system prompt rang out, "Congratulations. Following an epiphany, you've unlocked the close combat skill added effect. Sharpness LV1, passive, Sharpness LV1, passive effect. You've gained a basic understanding of the essence of primal force, able to effortlessly increase the power of the longsword in your hand, slightly enhancing its sharpness. Note: this effect is only valid when the host has primal force, and it has not been exhausted. Effective only when the host holds an edged weapon. Note: this effect is an added feature of a close combat skill. Once the conditions are met, the next level is automatically unlocked. Rain couldn't help but be overjoyed. Immediately, Rain focused his attention on the icon representing the giant bear sword technique, and sure enough, the accompanying special effect of the technique had increased. Giant bear sword technique LV7, 3023/5000, with added effects precision LV2, sharpness LV2. Precision LV2, passive effect. Sharpness LV2, passive effect. You have gained a further understanding of the essence of primal force, able to effortlessly increase the power of the longsword in your hand, modestly enhancing its sharpness. Note: to unlock sharpness LV3 in giant bear sword technique, the following conditions must be met. First, giant bear sword technique LV9 or above. Second, king bear breathing technique LV9 or above. 2 added effects. Rain closely examined the above text, and the descriptions of sharpness and precision were nearly the same. The main difference between LV2 and LV1 was the change from slightly to modestly. But the unlocking conditions were not the same. After pondering for a moment, Rain decided to try the Tokkul hammer technique. Since applying primal force to a sword produced a sharpness effect, what about applying it to a hammer? Although Rain already had a vague guess, he still needed to give it a try to know for sure. At that moment, Rain's ears twitched slightly. Next, his level 3 danger perception started alerting him. The sense of crisis wasn't strong, so Rain didn't turn his head to check, but continued calmly wiping the glimmering greatsword in his hands. In the dense forest tens of meters away, a dozen or so men dressed as mercenaries were lying in ambush, each holding different weapons, all with steady breaths and fierce faces. One of the mercenaries was peering at Rain through a monocular brass tube. However, likely considering the acute senses of a transcendent official knight, after the burly man glanced a few times, he quickly shifted his gaze, not continuing to stare at Rain. Another lone official knight, but judging from his swordsmanship, seems to be quite skilled. PFFT, no matter how skilled he is, how skilled could he be? Look at his face, he's clearly not even 18 years old. Don't tell me this guy could be a peak knight. One of the brutes scoffed. That's right, Scar is correct. No matter how strong he is, how strong could he be? We'll start with a volley of crossbow arrows that'll turn him into a sieve immediately. Yeah, carrying around a greatsword and a giant hammer looks quite intimidating, but damned if he isn't even wearing knight plate armor, probably still a novice knight with no real wilderness experience. Enough, all of you, quiet down. Since we've decided to go through with this, don't take it lightly, barked the burly man who'd been holding a brass monocular. Then he turned to a gaunt man beside him, who was holding a heavy crossbow and had only one eye left, and said, "One-eyed, take a few crossbowmen and start with a volley to test the waters, see what they're made of." One-eyed had the strength of a formal knight and was a bowman. Amongst their group, he was considered a powerful asset. The man known as One-eyed nodded slightly. Without uttering a word, he immediately began loading his crossbow. The crossbow arrow he was fitting flashed with a pale green glint. It was obvious that the arrow was poisoned. Indeed, silent people are often the most ruthless. After loading, One-eyed waved his hand to signal the other crossbowmen to cautiously step forward, positioning themselves within the maximum range of their weapons, directly encompassing Rain, who wasn't too far away. The rest of the team were readying their weapons, grinning viciously and poised to strike. As soon as their crossbowmen injured the young knight, they would swarm him, outnumbering him. This tactic was meant for dealing with slightly stronger teams or masters. They had practiced it to perfection. Subconsciously, they believed that this time, like before, the victory would come easily. By then, One-Eyed and the other crossbowmen had found their positions and were raising their heavy crossbows to aim. Suddenly, the young knight who had been polishing his greatsword just a second before vanished from their sights. Huh, where did he go? Including One-Eyed, the crossbowmen all wore expressions of astonishment or bewilderment. They immediately lowered their crossbows and began looking around. The next second, the leader of the group, the robust man, turned pale and shouted, "Watch out!" Before he could finish speaking, PFFT. One-Eyed suddenly felt the world spinning around him. He wondered why he was flying through the air, but almost immediately he saw a familiar headless torso. From the smooth cut on the neck, blood was spouting like a fountain. "That's my body, isn't it?" One-Eyed was horrified, but the next second a deep weariness began to assail his consciousness. Yet before he lost consciousness completely, One-Eyed heard cries of agony rising all around him. He knew these voices well. But what was the high-speed slicing noise, that SSS, SSS, SSS sound all about? He wanted to lift his head and see what was happening. But his eyelids were so heavy. He wanted to sleep. As One-Eyed's eyelids slowly closed, the scene around him had become a picture of chaos. Some were luckier, merely decapitated at the neck. The less fortunate suffered a worse fate, cut into several pieces, limbs and body parts scattered everywhere, probably too difficult to piece back together. Meanwhile, the robust man who'd been holding the brass monocular now had his eyes wide in terror, staring at Rain. He desperately clutched at his neck, attempting to stop the gushing red blood. But it was futile, for the wound was too deep. Almost half his neck was sliced open, and any deeper would have meant instant beheading. Thump! The robust man knelt down, falling face up as his sturdy body convulsed. His strong life force not yet ready to give in. Sometimes, a strong life force isn't a blessing, as it only prolongs the suffering. With his dying thoughts, the burly man couldn't comprehend how the situation, which had started as their ambush, had turned against them so swiftly. It seemed the other side had detected them in advance and charged without warning. In the blink of an eye, crossing the 40 or 50 meters, they were upon them, swinging that greatsword, with its strange cold glow, so sharp. Rain shook his greatsword, wiping the blood off the blade, and mumbled to himself, a familiar scent. "How interesting, Bask just warned me to be wary of the rebels, and here they are. But really, their strength is just too pathetic." Rain found that the effect of sharpness LV2 was quite useful. When he slashed through the chainmail and thick leather of Zaral's rebels, it felt as if he was tearing through paper. Find your next read on Empire. Even the knight's plate armor worn by the last robust man cracked open, without much effort, once Rain targeted the weak joint between the helmet and breastplate. Had it been before, it would not have been so effortless. Of course, the effect of accuracy LV2 was also indispensable. Or perhaps it should be said that the combined effect of accuracy and sharpness made killing these mediocre trash fish too easy. After some thought, instead of resting, Rain mounted his black horse and started towards Rachmond fishing port town, where Hass was. On horseback, Rain switched his weapon. Now he was toying with a mace in his hand. What effect would the force have if applied to the mace? At the same time, in Meister County Prison, within an office, a middle-aged man, dressed in the uniform of the prison guard captain, furrowed his brow in deep thought. However, his morose expression was enough to indicate his mood was anything but pleasant. Indeed, as early as half a month ago, Magi's had noticed something was amiss with the situation at the base. Normally, within the span of half a month, he would certainly have received some form of communication from the base, whether good news or bad. But in any case, there should have been some news. But now, the problem was that after such a long time, there had been no message from the base at all. This initially left him extremely puzzled. After waiting several more days, he knew for certain that something had happened at the base. Therefore, Magi's immediately dispatched his most trusted confidant to check on the base, the abandoned mine in the Wild Wolf Hills in Meister County. However, the situation report upon his confidant's return made his heart skip a beat. According to his confidant, the old mine where the base was located had collapsed significantly, and judging from the traces of gunpowder at the entrance of the passage, it was clearly man-made, and not due to an earthquake or natural decay from aging. Additionally, the several deliberately hidden traces of battle found nearby the mine further confirmed this. In other words, his organization's base in Meister County had been secretly and completely annihilated. Could it have been done by the Empire after its discovery, deploying people from a special unit? This truly left Magi's on tenterhooks for several days. But several days later, he noticed that the upper echelons of Meister County were very quiet, and no particular news had come through, which confused him. That isn't right. If it were a specialized operation by the Empire, then conventionally, after the base was taken out, a great purge would follow. Nobles, great families, merchant associations, and all connected to his organization in the county town would be rooted out. Of course, he would not be spared in this process either. But now it didn't seem like it was the work of any imperial special unit. What was going on? While Magi's did think of that young upstart knight, Rain, in his mind. Rain was at best someone with the strength of a veteran knight and had no powerful companions. How could he possibly be involved in the total annihilation of the base? Thus, Magi's began to have all his informants conduct investigations, but so far they had never found the perpetrator. At the same time in this month, he also faced questioning from two barons, Alonso and Norman, who doubted the credibility of their rebel organization, questioning how they could fail to deal with even a young upstart knight. He knew that this was not acceptable. If both men disseminated unreliable information about the resistance in noble circles. Within Meister County, his organization's operations throughout Meister County would lack the support of certain potential nobles. It can be said that the future actions of the entire organization in Meister County would encounter significant obstacles, and he, as a key liaison, could not shirk responsibility. Therefore, 3 days ago, he had sent out a call for help to those above. Magi's hoped that higher-ups would dispatch a powerful person to Meister County to take charge and swiftly reverse this unfavorable situation. As he estimated, someone should arrive within these few days. At that moment there came a knock on the door, interrupting Magi's train of thought. "My lord, Baron Alonso has arrived. How has he come again?" Magi said, his face showing a headache as he received the report from his confidant. Obviously, he couldn't refuse a meeting and could only nod and say, "Fine, let him come over." Couldn't be about that Rain again, damn it. These past few days, he had specifically tasked someone with investigating Rain's situation. Although Rain's resume showed the young man was very promising and talented, he did not stand out much in the entire Meister province. Furthermore, such an unestablished youth was always vulnerable. Magi's was very confident in his own organization. Once the person from above arrived, if they could find this Rain and deal with him, it ought to be an easy task. After all, the former person in charge of the original base was a peak knight. This time, after the incident, the organization would most likely send a great knight-level expert to take over. However, the latest intel suggested that this Rain had recently been absent from the county town, having gone to other places. His most trusted confidant was now gathering information through various channels, trying to figure out where exactly the other party had gone. Continue your adventure at Empire. Magi's thought this way. Even if they had not yet eliminated this youth, at least when Alonso and Norman asked, he would have a response. After all, with Rain not currently in Meister County, there was nothing he could do, right? In that case, the others would not be too upset after listening to him. After all, he was making progress on the matter, or else he would not know that Rain was not in the county town, right? But annoyingly, to this moment no information had come back regarding where exactly Rain had gone, which left him quite passive in face of Alonso's questioning. Shortly, a familiar figure with a large stride entered the room. It was the bearded man wearing a black noble's hunting suit with gold thread inlays, none other than Baron Alonso himself. Seeing Alonso enter, Magi's immediately stood up. And with a smile brimming on his face, he said, "The Honorable Baron Alonso, if you seek me. Just send me a word, and I should have come to visit you." Since he hadn't managed to handle the task entrusted by the other party, Magi's had to lower his posture a bit. Alonso looked at Magi's with a gloomy expression, and said, "Magi's, you know why I am here. How long has it been? Does it take a month to do this? Are you playing me? Today, if you can't give me a reasonable explanation, I think I will take back all the things I promised before." Hesitating upon hearing Alonso's words, Magi's was uncertain. Alonso's attitude was clearly more resolute than the last time. Could it be that he had also heard about the trouble at the base? However, Magi's thought again and felt that this was unlikely. After all, the base wasn't responsible for maintaining contact with the nobles of Meister County. He was the one handling that aspect. But under the circumstances, he must give Alonso an account, otherwise he feared what the other party might do. However, he couldn't reveal the news that the base had been completely wiped out by a mysterious person. After all, that was a family disgrace, and spreading the news would be too humiliating. As Magi's was indecisive, one of his trusted associates knocked on the door, came in, and whispered a few words to him. Magi's, already frustrated, had no intention of listening at first, and was about to send his associate away when his expression suddenly hardened, and he immediately turned to ask, "Is the person in the interrogation room?" "Yes, my lord." At that moment, Magi's paused to think, then immediately turned with a serious look and said to Alonso, "Baron Lord, please allow me to step away for 5 minutes. The explanation you want, I will give it to you in 5 minutes." After pondering for a moment, Alonso said, "Fine, I will give you 5 more minutes." Experience more content on Empire clearly. He too had sensed that Magi's must have received some kind of news. When Rain arrived at Rachmond fishing port town where Haas was, he found it strange that most of the townsfolk had grim expressions, as if they had encountered some difficulty. However, since his goal was to visit Haas, Rain stopped an older woman. "Hello. Good day to you, Knight Lord." Facing Rain, who was mounted on a tall horse and armed, the older woman was visibly nervous and quickly bowed in greeting. "I would like to know where Haas Klein's home is," Rain asked. Upon hearing that Rain was looking for Haas's address, the older woman visibly relaxed a lot and answered, "Captain Haas, he's injured. He should be resting at home right now. His home is just around the corner to the right, the first house there." "Knight Lord, do you need me to take you there?" "Thank you. No need, I think I can find it," Rain said with a smile, nodding his head and declining the older woman's kind offer. Although Rain had a smile on his face, he was somewhat surprised in his heart. Haas was injured. He wondered how serious it was. Continuing on his black horse, Rain soon arrived at the location the older woman had described. The house was similar to what Rain had in Flashgold Town, quite nice for the average citizen. But for someone of the knightly class, it seemed a bit humble. That was normal, of course, as Haas's knightly title had probably not been conferred yet. Rain knocked on the wrought iron gate, thump, thump, thump. At that moment, a ruddy-faced child cracked open the door and asked, "Hello, whom are you looking for?" "Is this the home of Haas Klein?" "I am his friend," Rain inquired. "Yes, are you my brother's friend? But why have I never seen you before?" The boy eyed Rain suspiciously. He, you can tell your brother that Rain has come to visit," Rain chuckled, not minding the suspicion. "All right, please wait a moment," the boy said as he now took in Rain's full appearance, noting the tall horse, the weapons, and the calm and friendly tone that commanded respect. The boy thus used an honorific and immediately turned to run into the house. Soon, a familiar, tall figure hurried out, his left arm clearly wrapped in white bandages. It was Haas. Seeing Rain, Haas cheerfully exclaimed, "Rain, you finally came to see me. I was about to come find you in Meister County, but unfortunately I got injured these past few days. Haas, it's been a long time. How did you end up like this? Come inside and we'll talk." Haas quickly opened the door and invited Rain in. The two exchanged pleasantries as they walked inside. "Recently, a juvenile scale-whisker ironshell turtle has been coming near our fishing port, occasionally attacking the returning full-loaded fishing boats, which has caused a lot of distress for the townspeople. Hence, Sheriff Benhad and I plan to find an opportunity to kill it," Haas explained. "After some time searching, we found its lair. But due to the scale-whisker ironshell turtle's formidable defensive power, we specially spent several days making a special type of crossbow arrow. Just 2 days ago, when we went to take it down, we suddenly realized that the creature had already matured. In the battle, both Sheriff Benhad and I were injured. Apparently, it was attacking the fishing boats and consuming their catch to build up energy and break through its maturation phase. After we attacked the scale-whisker ironshell turtle, it became very vengeful, and now it's attacking the fishing boats much more frequently. Even if the boats are empty, it will still attack." "Oh, how powerful is this scale-whisker ironshell turtle?" Rain asked, raising an eyebrow. "Now the creature's length has surpassed 10 meters, reaching 12 meters. As for combat power, I'm afraid only a great knight could take it down. Has sighed, seemingly regretful that at the time he couldn't seize the opportunity to kill the creature before its sea beast transformation. Originally, Rain was just listening to a story. After all, such incidents were not rare, and the Empire had specific protocols to deal with them. But when he heard that the creature's length was over 10 meters, Rain's eyes gleamed. Because didn't that mean this ironback turtle with scales and whiskers barely qualified as a gigantic creature? In that case, perhaps he could acquire an additional beast essence. Thus, Rain asked with interest, does the ironback turtle with scales and whiskers have any special moves? A. Do you want to try to kill the ironback turtle with scales and whiskers? No. Although you're a bit stronger than me compared to the ironback turtle with scales and whiskers, there's still a huge difference. Ooh. I just want to understand more. I'm still quite unfamiliar with these ferocious sea beasts. Rain shrugged and asked kindly. Haha, that's no problem. I thought you wanted to attempt to kill the ironback turtle with scales and whiskers. Don't even try it. Sheriff Ben had also retired from the Imperial Navy, possessing the strength of a seasoned knight, but he still got seriously injured. Has solemnly warned. The most troublesome thing about this ironback turtle with scales and whiskers is its powerful defensive capability, especially its shell, which is harder than steel. Now, after undergoing metamorphosis, the ironback turtle with scales and whiskers can also cast an additional earthy yellow shield, further enhancing its defensive power. When my knight's longsword hacked at it, it couldn't make a scratch. Moreover, the ironback turtle with scales and whiskers itself is extremely strong and fast. Luckily, we had brought several giant crossbows with us. Otherwise, we might not have been able to come back. We even lost 2 men during the retreat. As has narrated, his face still seemed to bear traces of shock. Rain nodded as he listened. This kind of strong defense was indeed a bit tricky to deal with, however. For him, it probably wouldn't be too big of a problem. Rain patted the pig head hammer on his back. Dinner time. Rain met Haz's parents. Haz's father was a portly middle-aged man with a smile always lingering on his face, the head cook at the nearby Campus Manor. Haz's mother, on the other hand, ran a bakery, with a kind face and a somewhat plump figure, likely due to years of kneading dough, requiring a sturdy base for the task. Both parents spent their years dealing with food. No wonder a commoner's family could raise someone of Haz's stature. Rain thought to himself. Upon meeting Rain and learning he was a friend made by Haz during the aristocratic enrollment examination, they greeted Rain with great enthusiasm. The dinner ended in a warm and cheerful atmosphere, and Rain got to taste the stewed giant spike salmon that Haz had been raving about. A 20-plus pound salmon seasoned with garlic, basil, and sage, stewed for 2 hours. The aroma and flavor were irresistible. How is it, Rain? The giant spike salmon is delicious, right? It's indeed very delicious. Unfortunately, the fishing boats dare not go out to sea recently. You should know these days are the best for catching giant spike salmon. Haz sighed, seemingly reminded of something. Is it because of that ironback turtle with scales and whiskers? Yes, it lurks in the narrow channel leading in and out of the port. None of the fishermen are willing to risk their lives to go out to sea. After that incident, Sheriff Ben had said that because the whole of Rossby County has been troublesome lately, it might take a few more days for the county town to send a team over. So that was it. No wonder the townspeople all looked so worried. The town was a fishing port, with most residents involved in the fishing industry. Don't worry, Haz, the Empire's borders are vast, and there are many masters. Maybe some passing master will casually slay that ironback turtle with scales and whiskers, Rain said with a smile, trying to offer some reassurance. Haha, I do hope that you, Rain, can become such a master one day. Haz laughed heartily upon hearing this. He had not expected Rain, usually not much of a talker, to have such a sense of humor sometimes. The next morning, Rain mounted his black horse, bid farewell to the warm-hearted Haz family, and left Richmond fishing port. But after he left the town, he took a detour to the seaside. Last night at dinner, Rain also learned the exact location of the scaled-mane ironback turtle. Rain planned, before leaving, to take care of the troubles of Haz and the townspeople as well, enjoy new adventures from Empire the Holy Mother. No, it could only be blamed on the scaled-mane ironback turtle for growing too large. Over 10 meters, which is the category of behemoth as stated by Master Ganther, its heart would generate a special substance which could be used to make behemoth essence. So, an apology was due. Besides, Rain also wanted to try out the special effects of the hammer skill he realized last night. Rain focused his attention on the knight, Transcendent panel, his large hands grasping the icon with the Warhammer pattern Toggle Hammer technique. Shock LV1 passive effect. You have a basic understanding of the essence of primal force, and you can freely mobilize primal force to enhance the power of the Warhammer in your hands, slightly increasing its shock effect. Note, this effect is only effective when the host possesses primal force and it is not exhausted, and only when the host is holding a blunt weapon. Note, this effect belongs to the additional special effects of melee combat skills and will automatically unlock the next level upon satisfying the conditions. This was a special effect about blunt weapons that Rain realized yesterday. However, Rain's pig head hammer was quite special. When the flat end of the pig head hammer was used for attacking, it was considered a blunt attack, but when the spiked end was used, it would be considered a piercing attack, replete not with shock but with the sharpness effect. Now there was one more thing that Rain needed to do, and that was to allocate skill points. The reason was simple. His current level of Toggle Hammer technique was only LV5, 354/2000, and both the accompanying shock and precision effects were at the LV1 tier. It might be sufficient against general enemies, but against a large, ferocious sea beast like the scaled mane ironback turtle, whose strength was comparable to a great knight's and whose defensive power was far superior, Rain felt it was better to improve another tier. Note, to unlock Shock LV2 for Toggle Hammer technique, the following conditions must be met. 1. Toggle Hammer technique LV6 or higher. 2. Bear King breathing method LV6 or higher. Note, to unlock Precision LV2 for Toggle Hammer technique, the following conditions must be met. 1. Toggle Hammer technique LV6 or higher. 2. Strength 20 points, Agility 16 points, Constitution 18 or higher. Looking at the next tier requirements for these two effects, he only needed to add 1 skill point for both effects to advance to LV2. An extremely cost-effective move. When the remaining skill points on the attribute panel decreased from 3 to 2, Toggle Hammer technique also jumped to the LV6 tier at once. In an instant, a stream of fragmented Toggle Hammer technique training memories flooded into Rain's mind. These scattered fragments of hammer skill training memories flashed through Rain's mind like paintings, swiftly integrating into the memories of his body's muscles and tendons. When Rain opened his eyes again, it was as if he had experienced half a year's worth of Toggle Hammer technique training. What was more important, the two effects shock and precision both advanced to the LV2 tier. Rain looked again at the new text descriptions for both effects. The descriptions for shock and precision were more or less the same. The main difference at LV2 compared to LV1 was that slightly changed to moderately, meaning their power was further enhanced. At that moment, suddenly, Rain's entire body stiffened, because just then an unexpected system prompt appeared. Ding! Detected that the host's 2 extraordinary combat skills have reached LV6, triggering special promotion to the Advanced Class Weapon Master, Legendary. Preconditions for advancing to Weapon Master. Legendary are 1. At least 3 different categories of extraordinary combat skills LV10 or higher. 2. Physical breakthrough value reaches 100%. 3. Any breathing method LV9 or higher. 4. Strength 20 points or higher, Agility 20 points or higher, Constitution 20 points or higher. 5. High-grade magic potion Behemoth Essence. Current conditions not met. Advancement to Weapon Master, Legendary, failed. Hiss. Rain's attention was almost entirely captured by 2 words Legendary occupation panel. Staring at the sudden system prompt, Rain read it over several times silently, his heart surging with excitement. Enjoy more content from Empire, he had not expected that merely thinking about enhancing his Toggle Hammer technique to LV6 in order to kill the Scalewhisker Ironback Turtle would accidentally lead to the discovery of the Legendary Weapon Master class information. At that moment, Rain felt as if he had been suddenly hit by $1 million jackpot. After all, this was a legendary class panel we're talking about, which is clearly a notch above the transcendent level. After calming the excitement in his heart, Rain started to systematically compare the preconditions of both the Legendary Weapon Master and the Transcendent Great Knight. He was very curious about why one was considered legendary and the other merely transcendent. Looking at the latter conditions, the Legendary Weapon Master and the Transcendent Great Knight almost completely overlap, so the greatest difference must be the first condition. Any 3 extraordinary battle techniques of different weapon categories above LV10. Rain mulled over this sentence, his mind lighting up with understanding. Clearly, it was this difference in conditions that designated the Weapon Master as a legendary class, while the Great Knight remained at the transcendent level. All three extraordinary battle techniques at LV-10. While it might look like just one condition, Rain was acutely aware of how difficult it truly was. Rain roughly estimated that if he didn't have the system and had to rely on his own hard training, reaching LV-10 in one extraordinary combat skill could take 20 or 30 years, and that's assuming everything went smoothly. For 3 skills, that would be damn well 60 or 70 years. Hiss, no wonder it's rated as a legendary class panel, scary as hell. An ordinary person would grow old before even completing the training. Gathering his thoughts, Rain then focused on the words weapon categories. Different weapon categories. A knight's longsword and a bastard sword should both be considered single-handed swords. Thus, the combat skills for these two types of weapons would fall under the category of one-handed swordsmanship, he pondered. As for my dual-handed greatsword and two-handed warhammer, according to the system's indications, they each belong to different categories, meaning I only need to choose one more to fulfill the 3 required categories. Previously, I acquired the Empire's military swordsmanship, which, if assumed to be enhanced to LV-10, would meet the conditions. However, should I choose single-handed swordsmanship for the 3rd skill, or something else? Rain thought about it and found himself indecisive for a moment. After some time, he shook his head, muttering to himself, "No rush, my giant bear sword technique and Tokkul hammer technique haven't reached LV-10 yet. I have time to contemplate this issue." Furthermore, judging from its name and prerequisites, the Weapon Master seems to specialize in a variety of weapons, which likely means strong combat capabilities, possibly on par with masters of the greatsword. And most importantly, according to the system's hints, it doesn't conflict with the path of a wizard. It's the lack of conflict that matters most. Now, the former sense of loss Rain felt for missing the career paths of a master of the sword. Greatsword and Sword Saint, which offer extremely high offensive capabilities, had completely vanished without a trace. Even with the hint of transitioning into a Great Knight, Rain had felt a bit disheartened, knowing Great Knights had considerably weaker attack power compared to Greatsword Masters. Nothing lifts the spirit like joyous events. As Rain mulled over these thoughts, he rode to a river mouth near the coast, which is also where the shipping lanes near Richmond Fishing Port were located. Scale-whisker ironback turtles, much like regular sea turtles, favor near-shore river mouths that flow into the sea, because this is where fresh and saltwater mix and food is abundant, and there also grow many sea reeds reaching 3 to 4 meters in height. Perfect for hiding. At that moment, as the sea breeze passed, the dense sea reeds rustled. Rain dismounted, carrying his greatsword and warhammer, and began to search carefully. He quickly found large and obvious clawed footprints. He carefully followed the clawed tracks, not expecting to leave the reed marsh so soon and to instead quickly arrive at a beach at the foot of a mountain. The other side of the beach was close to the sea. Rain's eyes narrowed, for he saw in the distance a large mound of sand situated in a corner of the beach. Despite being covered in sand, the partially exposed body and the massive size were undeniably that of the scale-whisker ironback turtle mentioned by Haas. His excellent vision allowed Rain to examine the gigantic creature from head to toe, even from 100 meters away. Its eyes, as big as a grown man's fist, were tightly closed, as though it was napping. The beak-like mouth stretched back almost to the neck. Rain began to understand why it was named the scale-whisker ironback turtle. Even the turtle's eyelids had small, dense scales for protection, and its paws, partially uncovered by the sand, were coated with thick green scales. Moreover, its lower jaw was adorned with dozens of thick whiskers, seemingly without any practical function, but perhaps just to add to its intimidating appearance. Since the creature was resting, an ambush was naturally the first choice, and of course, with the experience from the previous encounter with the aquatic plesiosaur, Rain was well prepared for contingencies. If discovered, he was ready for a direct confrontation. Rain took out his warhammer and from a distance began to quietly approach the scale-whisker ironback turtle from behind. Wary that the energy fluctuations from witchcraft might awaken the napping scale-whisker ironback turtle, Rain refrained from using fire-based spells like high-temperature field. Seemingly slow to react, Rain focused intently and held his breath as he approached within about 10 meters behind the scaled-whisker ironback turtle. The creature still hadn't moved. Rain's expression turned solemn as his legs suddenly exerted force. With a thud, sand erupted from beneath his feet, and he shot toward the scaled whisker ironback turtle like an arrow released from a bow. The specifics of a stealth attack. With a hammer, what technique do you need? The simpler, the more brutal, the more effective. If the opponent's shell is the hardest part, then shatter it from the hardest point. Limit break. Huge strength LV3. Strength burst, earth-splitting hammer. Rain, leaping through the air, seemed to have ballooned to at least twice his size. His muscles and fascia tensed like the fully drawn string of a powerful bow, and he raised the dark pig-head hammer above his head before fiercely striking down at the center of the scaled whisker ironback turtle's shell. Just as Rain forcefully pushed off the ground, the scaled whisker ironback turtle's fist-sized eyes suddenly popped open, sensing the danger. However, since Rain had attacked from behind and was already directly above the shell, he was in the ironback turtle's blind spot. So the ironback turtle stretched its neck, looking quickly left and right, but failed to spot its enemy, which caused a look of confusion in its large eyes. But the next second, a huge crash resonated from the center of its back. Clang, sparks flew everywhere. Crack, the two sounds almost overlapped. Under the effects of Hammer Mastery LV3, along with the double special effects Shock LV2 and Accuracy LV2, Rain's strike had the power of a 205mm howitzer shell. Awe, accompanied by the scaled whisker ironback turtle's scream. Its shell, 7 or 8 meters in diameter and thick, was completely shattered by Rain's ferocious blow, especially at the center, which was completely fragmented. If someone had observed Rain's entire stealth attack from a distance, they would notice. Stay connected through Empire. If the scaled whisker ironback turtle's shell were compared to an iron basin, then the small black hammer, the size of a fingernail, had just smashed into it, causing the ironback turtle's limbs and neck to catapult outward. Rather comical. But just when Rain was about to follow up his attack, a thick yellow energy covered the scaled whisker ironback turtle's body, blocking all subsequent hammer blows. At this moment, the battle's vibrations caused all the surrounding sand to scatter. Rain got a clear look at the full span of the turtle's shell, which closely resembled fossil giant tortoise shells from his previous life. With a dozen mountain-like ringed scales. Now, the tops of these mountains were glowing with yellow light. This mysterious side of energy fluctuations. It must be the scaled whisker ironback turtle's special ability, which is the earthen yellow shield Hass mentioned. Seemingly frightened by Rain's combat prowess, the scaled whisker ironback turtle, displaying no desire to continue fighting the little one in front of it, opted to make a break for the nearby sea, protected by its strongest defense. This immediately changed Rain's expression. The sea was not his battleground. Right away, Rain increased the frequency of swings with his pig-head hammer, causing the yellow shield to bang, bang under the blows. Although the color faded slightly, the yellow shield stood firm, like a rock immovable by the seaside waves. Indeed, only witchcraft can defeat witchcraft, right? However, Rain didn't believe in such superstitions. Add points. As the remaining skill points on the attribute panel dropped from 2 right arrow 1 tackle hammer technique was also instantly raised to LV7 level, equaling the giant bear sword technique. Suddenly, fragments of memories about practicing tackle hammer technique flooded into Rain's mind. These fragmented memories of hammer skill practice flashed one by one in Rain's mind and swiftly integrated into his muscle memory. It was as if he had spent over a year devoted to practicing tackle hammer technique in some mysterious space, all by himself. However, there was a difference. With a LV3 hammer mastery boost, at this moment, the hammer skill's power was one among all his extraordinary combat skills. When Rain gripped his pig-head hammer again, a special feeling dawned on him. This sensation was not the familiarity of the proficient level, but rather a deeper connection to the essence of the weapon. Thud. The hammer crashed down again. This time, the scaled whisker ironback turtle looked terrified and desperately bolted into the sea, because its yellow shield trembled violently under the hammer's blow, on the verge of collapsing. One day earlier, outside an interrogation room at Meister County Prison, an informant was reporting to Magi's about the situation concerning a prisoner. The man's name is Vil, originally a bandit who roamed the wild Wolf Hills. A few days ago, he got drunk in Old John's bar in County Town, got into a fight, and was reported by someone. After the County Town Patrol verified the complaint, he was brought here, the confidant reported. He was initially set to be executed by hanging. But since you said to investigate the hideout through various channels last time, we planted informants among the prison inmates, the confidant continued. After learning this, he claimed to have crucial information to report. We've provisionally examined it and it seems legit. Also, the guy proposes that if his information is true, he wants his freedom. I can't make that decision on my own, so you need to come in person, sir, the confidant added. Well done, Magi's patted the confidant's shoulder. Magi's walked into the interrogation room, only to see a middle-aged man with disheveled hair, wearing a tattered gray linen coat, emanating a strange odor, shackled to the interrogation chair. Upon seeing Magi's and his companion enter, the man's eyes revealed terror, and his legs tightened even more, as if this man named Vil was particularly afraid of someone like Magi's dressed in a prison guard's uniform. Magi's examined the man for a moment, noting numerous whip marks and small burns all over his body. It seemed his subordinates had left quite an impression with their methods of punishment. However, this was good. The man's psychological defenses were on the verge of collapse, and coaxing some words out of him should be very simple, and it would be easy to discern truth from falsehood. Magi showed a radiant smile and said, "Don't be afraid, Vil, just repeat to me what you said before." This. My lord, then do you guarantee my release? The other lord just now said he can't decide that, only you can make that decision, Vil said with fear, glancing at the insignia on Magi's uniform, knowing that he was speaking with the one in charge. That will require your full cooperation. Believe me, if what you say is true, then releasing you would be a very easy task for me, Magi said. The deep tone of Magi's voice and his slow speech inexplicably created a sense of trust in Vil's heart. But in fact, this was a psychological suggestion, making Vil feel as if he had grasped a life-saving straw. He quickly began to speak. That day, I was looking for suitable targets to rob near the abandoned mine, when by chance I saw several people moving a lot of stuff out of the woods onto 2 wagons with a luxurious carriage at the front of them. Wait, Magi's interrupted. Why go to the area around the abandoned mine? You should be aware of whose turf that is, right? It's a new bandit group rumored to be powerful. The boss told us not to provoke them, but we haven't had any business for a long time, so I trespassed a little, just a bit, Vil explained. Magi's nodded upon hearing Vil's explanation. It sounded reasonable, with no obvious points of suspicion. He then gestured for Vil to continue. This made me very happy. At the time, I thought it must be some noble hiding their riches here, and I was going to make a fortune, Vil went on. So, after they left, I followed their tracks to the vicinity of the abandoned mine. At first, I hesitated, not daring to get close since it was another group's territory. But then I noticed something was off. It seemed like the place had been abandoned, so I moved in and realized that the group there must have been wiped out. After Vil finished his story, Magi's pondered for a while and asked, "Do you remember anything about those people? Or do you recognize them? I've never seen them before, but the young knight leading them had a distinctive look with a hammer and a greatsword on his back." Vil gestured, making a crossing motion with his hands. Magi's nodded. His confidant had already told him about this. It was highly likely the newly elevated Baron Rain. By the way, you just mentioned that in front of the wagons there was a luxurious carriage, is that correct? Magi seemed to recall something and asked again. Yes, my lord, Vil nodded. Was there any distinctive feature or pattern on that luxurious carriage? There was a crest on the carriage, and although it was a bit far, I have good eyesight and could make it out. It seemed to be a kite shield, and on the shield was a flower resembling a rose. Upon hearing this, Magi's immediately beckoned and whispered to his confidant, "Have you found out which noble family in Mace County City bears that crest?" "My lord, I just looked it up. It's the crest of the Crowley family," the confidant whispered back. The Crowley family. Magi's eyes narrowed in contemplation. He seemed unfamiliar with the family. Seeing Magi's expression, the confidant knew his lord might not recall the family, and reminded him softly, "Do you forget that beautiful lady, Jennifer?" A gleam flickered in Magi's eyes as he exclaimed, "Her, that gorgeous widow." Immediately, Magi's remembered the stunning lady he had seen at the ball, who had even caught his own attention. Didn't Alonso suppress her family harshly? How could they have the strength to attack his organization's stronghold? Magi's asked again, "Have you checked? Who has the Crowley family been seen with recently, or who have they grown close to?" "Well, it is still being investigated, but it's known that the Crowley family has been quite close with Rain. About 2 months ago, he became the Crowley family's guardian knight. Now that Rain has become a baron, the servants and guards of his new manor all come from the Crowley family. As for other information, it's still being looked into. It won't be so fast. This is enough. Magi's face grew stern. Continue reading on Empire. Various signs indicated that this newly minted Baron Rain was behind the eradication of the stronghold. Although he didn't yet know how the other party managed it, since even with the Crowley family involved, they still lacked sufficient strength. Having a lead was good. With more time, they should be able to get to the bottom of it. Since the interrogation was over, Magi's planned to return to his office, as Alonso was still waiting for his reply. Seeing Magi's rise to his feet, Vil couldn't help but show anxiety and said, "Sir, you haven't said whether you can release me yet." At Vil's words, Magi's motion to turn around slowed, and he turned his head back to his trusted collaborator and said, "Then as he wishes, release his soul." Release the soul? While Vil was still pondering the meaning of this sentence, suddenly there was a cracked sound, a sharp pain transmitted from his neck, and then he found himself able to see the white wall behind him. Back in the office, Magi's naturally was not going to honestly share information with Alonso. Just now in the corridor, he had thought of how to maximize his benefits. Upon entering the door, Magi's feigned an angry demeanor and interrogated. "Lord Alonso, the newly promoted Baron Rain whom you asked us to kill last time is probably not that simple, right? Due to your concealment, the organization has lost a peak knight and several senior knights." "Oh, so you've already made your move. Was the loss caused by Rain alone, or were there others?" Alonso hesitated, speaking somewhat unnaturally. He, of course, had concealed something. The fact that the beast knight Giovanni was wounded by a strange druid was left unsaid. It wasn't that he truly hoped the rebel forces wouldn't succeed, only that Alonso didn't want the other party to hike up the price. Moreover, he had warned Magi's to be cautious before the action commenced, so naturally couldn't be blamed on him. Magi's observed Alonso for a while, not seeing the expression he anticipated. Then he swiftly changed the topic, saying, "Whether Rain was alone or had help, the organization can handle it. However, Lord Alonso, given that Rain's strengths far exceeded expectations, the contents of our deal naturally need to be adjusted as well." Still in Meister County, the underground hall, Giovanni, wearing a scythe-shaped weapon on his back, bowed slightly to the corpulent high priest, saying, "High priest, my body has fully recovered. I heard from Merrill that the appearance of that druid in Flashgold Town last time was an accident. Is that correct?" "Yes, Merrill has rechecked multiple times. The druid's trace has never appeared again. It must have been a coincidence passing through." The corpulent high priest nodded. "If that's the case, then let me take the task of killing the newly promoted knight Rain. Giovanni, are you sure your body has completely recovered? Also, according to the latest news from Alonso, this Rain has been promoted not just to a knight but to a newly appointed Imperial Baron." "What?" Giovanni exclaimed in surprise. "Doesn't that sound incredible? At first, I didn't quite believe it either, but this information has been confirmed through multiple sources to be true, including Count Habs, who has already met with this Rain. Actually, continuing to go after this Rain now doesn't quite align with our interests," continued the high priest gravely. Hearing the high priest's words implying giving up, Giovanni's eyebrows arched, and he solemnly said, "High priest, the dignity of the Black Flame Church cannot be challenged. Please let me handle this matter." The high priest was suddenly silent. Although continuing to eliminate Rain now doesn't align with the church's interests, the emotions of a capable subordinate also needed to be considered, putting the high priest in a tricky position. At this moment, the voice of Merrill came from the big gates of the underground hall, saying, "High priest, Rain's whereabouts have been discovered. He seems to be headed to Rossby County. Moreover, according to reliable information, the appointment signed by Count Habs just today shows that Rain should be returning to Meister County within 5 days, to take up the position of governor and sheriff of Fishing Port Town." After a long pause, the high priest's deep voice resonated again. "Giovanni, then this matter is still yours to handle. However, I hope you can minimize the impact of this affair." "As you command, high priest. I will try to act on Rain's return journey and clean up any traces thoroughly so that it won't implicate the church," Giovanni replied, smirking slightly as he bowed. He knew the high priest had been persuaded by him. Indeed, killing a newly appointed Imperial Baron could cause a severe backlash, possibly prompting an in-depth investigation by the Imperial authorities. However, having been severely injured because of this Rain, he had to let out this bad blood no matter what. On a beach not far from Richmond Fishing Port, a huge scale-whiskered ironback turtle lay in a pool of blood. Meanwhile, a man was using a dual-handed greatsword to cut open the corpse of a giant turtle, seemingly trying to extract something. At that moment, a cylindrical object suddenly rolled out from within the scaly-backed iron turtle. "Huh? What's this?" Message in a bottle? Rain eyed a brown bottle that had fallen out of the scaly-backed iron turtle. The material, judging by its appearance, seemed to be the rarely seen glass, which piqued his curiosity. Holding it up to the sunlight, Rain examined it carefully and noticed it appeared to have something similar to paper inside. After a moment's thought, Rain carefully opened the stopper, and indeed it was a message in a bottle. The contents weren't paper but seemed to be a piece of parchment. Why does this feel so familiar, this texture? In an instant, a flash of insight crossed Rain's mind. He quickly pulled out a small iron box from his bosom and compared them. Incredibly, this was a quarter of Pirate King Vincent Sanborn's treasure map. One linked to the fireball technique. Could it be that this scaly-backed iron turtle had some connection with the Pirate King? This was indeed a possibility, considering turtles are renowned for their longevity. Enjoy new stories from Empire, but this was still a highly improbable event, and Rain felt he definitely had to thank the goddess of fortune. However, this made him feel both anxious and excited. Previously, having only half was still manageable, but now he had 3/4. This made Rain's desire to find the remaining quarter of the treasure map even more intense. But such things were somewhat serendipitous, and after some thought, Rain couldn't help but sigh. Rain built up a bonfire and began to simply process the materials from the scaly-backed iron turtle while contemplating the prerequisites for the Weapon Master job change. Second, third, and fourth prerequisites: 2. Physical breakthrough limit reach 100%. 3. Any breathing technique LV9 or higher. 4. Strength 20 points or higher, agility 20 points or higher, constitution 20 points or higher. For him, these were almost fully completed or already done, presenting no difficulty whatsoever. As for the fifth prerequisite, high-level magic potion giant beast essence, though slightly troublesome, he already had the hearts of 2 giant beasts as raw materials. Once back in County Town through the military supply department, this issue should not be difficult to resolve. If all else failed, contacting the Empire's military through Hamilton should also not be a big problem. The real trouble now was in the first prerequisite. 1. Any 3 different weapon category transcendent combat skills, LV10 or above. This meant that before sorting out the high-level magic potion giant beast essence, it would be best if he could gather enough skill points to raise 3 transcendent combat skills to LV10, which was of the utmost urgency. Rain glanced at his attribute panel. He currently had 1 remaining skill point, while both Giant Bear Sword Technique and Tackle Hammer Technique were at LV7, leaving a gap of 5 skill points. This 5-point gap should not be too big of an issue. Rain glanced at Armorsmith LV1, 17/100, with the Crowley family helping him gather materials. Raising it should take no time at all. Achieving for 5 points of skills shouldn't be too difficult. The key was the 3rd combat skill. The Empire's military swordsmanship was only at LV3. 122/500, and shield defense and archery were also at LV3. Even if he practiced day and night after returning, due to time constraints, he could at most push it to LV5, which meant there was still a 5-point skill point gap waiting for him. Seemingly unable to think of a good solution, Rain couldn't help but furrow his brow. Just then, the fluttering sound of wings filled the air. A pigeon with a blue crest suddenly descended from the sky, landing next to the small pigeon cage on the brown horse, beginning to intimately mesh with another blue-helmeted pigeon. Blue-helmeted pigeon. Rain's pupils contracted, and he immediately got up and walked over. Before departing, Rain had told the beautiful woman that if he encountered any trouble, she should contact him using the blue-helmeted pigeon. Rain removed a small wooden cylinder, the thickness of a thumb, from the leg of the blue helmet pigeon, opened the stopper, and found a note from the Crowley family inside. Baron Norman has issued a bloody duel challenge to you today. It has been noted that he has also applied for the challenge with Count Habs at the same time. According to reliable information, the opponent has taken a secret potion and has returned to peak strength, possibly possessing the power to challenge a great knight, unconfirmed. Please consider carefully whether to return to Meister County anytime soon. Jennifer. After reading the letter from the lady, Rain's first reaction was a sigh of relief. Good, it's not that family member or Jennifer herself had encountered any trouble. A bloody duel? Rain mused thoughtfully. He had come to understand this term after being knighted, commonly used to resolve certain irreconcilable conflicts among nobility, divided into ordinary duels and bloody duels. Ordinary duels allow for surrender, but bloody duels, indicated by the very word bloody, mean much more. There can be no surrender, and it ends only with one party's death. If ordinary duels can still be seen from time to time, bloody duels are much rarer. In Meister County, not seeing a bloody duel once every year or two would be quite normal. However, the next second, Rain was quite puzzled. Where did this Baron Norman spring from? He was familiar with the name, but couldn't for the life of him remember where he had heard it. After pondering for several seconds, Rain's eyes lit up, and he remembered. Months ago, when he was practicing the giant bear sword technique in the dense forest at the entrance to Flashgold Town, he had been attacked by a middle-aged man wielding a sword. One of the man's statements had made a deep impression on him to this day. Rain still remembered the man's exact words. "I am giving you a chance now. If you are willing to pledge allegiance to the Norman family, it will be the most correct decision of your life." Yes, that was the phrase. Moreover, when the man spoke those words, that lofty attitude, though his words were inviting, it clearly felt like charity. At that time, Rain had thought he was from some great nobility, but as it turned out, it was from the very family where Dennis belonged. So it goes without saying this Baron Norman must be Dennis's father. But did their grudge really reach such a level? Rain was quite puzzled. He and Clea barely had some contact. Was that enough to warrant a Baron father stepping in to defend his son in a bloody duel with him? Thinking about it, Rain found it utterly absurd. All my previous life, I've heard that overindulgence by a mother often leads to a child's failure. Could this be a case of an overly indulgent father leading to failure? Rain shook his head, quite speechless. Wait a moment. Suddenly, a spark of realization flashed through Rain's mind. It was him, he remembered. Previously, after being attacked by the level 3 wizard apprentice, Adams, a young clerk from Adams's shop, had said. A middle-aged man came in not long before, and Adams dismissed him. So, the details of their discussion and the man's exact identity are unclear, but since that middle-aged man arrived, Adams disappeared without a trace. Afterward, night watchman Captain Mateo, who was rather short in stature, even provided him with a portrait of the middle-aged man. Drawn based on the young clerk's memory, Rain pulled out the thin parchment from within his tunic. As he examined it carefully, sure enough, the more he looked, the more familiar the middle-aged man in the drawing became. It was clearly very similar to that rascal Dennis. So it turns out this middle-aged man is Baron Norman, and it was he who hired or asked Adams to attempt to assassinate me. At the time, Rain always felt there was a faint familiarity about the middle-aged man's face, but he just couldn't quite place where that sense of familiarity came from. Now all has been revealed. Having figured this out, Rain couldn't help but feel a flicker of anger rise in his heart. To come and try to assassinate me several times over some petty issue of his son's jealousy, had I not been strong enough, I might well be 6 feet under by now. And now a bloody duel again, has he become completely fixated on me. However, Baron Norman's strength must be quite formidable, although Jennifer is not entirely certain if he does indeed have the strength to challenge a great knight. That would mean he has strength comparable to my own. This is interesting. Rain had no fear whatsoever. One of the most important things he learned from his intensive training with Master Ganther was about belief. Explore more at Empire. If a greatsword master holds an unshakable belief that the sword in his hands can cut through anything, then Rain gradually came to understand that having a firm belief in one's own ability to defeat powerful adversaries is equally a formidable force. Do not worry. I will arrive in Meister on schedule in 4 days. While ensuring safety, gather information on Baron Norman. Also, look after the emotional well-being of my family. Rain, after thinking it over, Rain quickly wrote a reply, placed it inside the little cylinder, and tied it to the blue helmet pigeon. With the flapping of wings, the blue helmet pigeon shot into the northern sky, like an arrow released from a bow. His thoughts returning, Rain started cutting the scaly-whiskered ironback turtle's shell into large pieces, and after roasting them briefly over a bonfire, stacked them up. These naturally protruding, thick, hard, and heavy shells made excellent shield materials. Even for Rain, cutting them open had required considerable effort. In addition, there's the massive corpse of the ironback turtle with scaled whiskers, resembling a sand dune. With a bit of processing, one could harvest a ton or two of fierce beast meat. The quality of meat from such large, fierce wild beasts is very high. It would truly be a shame to discard it. After some thought, Rain had already come up with a solution. It's better to give it to Hars than to waste such a treasure. Besides, it looks like there's no time to go to Rossby City now. I originally wanted to see Evelyn and Major Mary. Now, I can only postpone it for another day. Meanwhile, Rain recalled the sensation he felt when his Tackle Hammer technique advanced to level 7. This must be a realm beyond mastery, reaching an even higher level. But he also knew that, to a large extent, this was dependent on the level 3 hammer skill specialization. Otherwise, it made no sense for his level 7 giant bear sword technique to still be at the mastery level, while the level 7 Tackle Hammer technique had entered the next realm. Rain vaguely remembered Master Ganther mentioning that after mastery comes the level of a Meister. However, the status he had barely achieved with the aid of hammer skill specialization could at most be considered as half-step Meister level, and there was still a difference compared to the true Meister level. At this moment, Rain suddenly remembered that due to the sudden appearance of the floating bottle, later being busy dealing with the heart of the ironback turtle with scaled whiskers, he hadn't had the chance to check the system messages. Your skill Tackle Hammer technique has improved. Experience plus 1,336. You have experienced a battle, Knight, Transcendent, experience plus 379. After this battle, the level of Knight, Transcendent, reached level 5, 597/2000, and the Tackle Hammer technique advanced to level 7, 1,690/5000. And only one skill point remained, while all 3 attribute points had not been used. Soon after processing the turtle shell, Rain rode his horse a short distance south before heading back to Richmond Fishing Port. He found 2 town residents who appeared honest and sincere, gave each of them a silver coin, and had them deliver a message to Hars. The problem has been solved. Head to the beach at the entrance to the sea to collect the battle spoils. Bring more people, and when you have time, find a caravan to send the turtle shell to me. Rain. The shells of these ironback turtles with scaled whiskers were excessively heavy, and Rain planned to have Hars find a caravan to transport them for him. After completing all this, Rain mounted his tall black horse and sped towards the direction of Meister County. Richmond Fishing Port at Hars's doorstep. A message from Rain. He wants me to go to the beach at the entrance to the sea. Hars was initially quite bewildered, but when the messenger said, "When you have time, find a caravan to send the turtle shell to me," Hars's eyes widened in shock. A bolt of lightning crossed his mind, and he muttered to himself, "Could it be? Impossible, impossible." Hars's younger brother, confusedly looking up at his own brother, who rarely showed such a loss of composure, asked curiously, "Brother, what's impossible?" "I'll tell you when I get back." No sooner had the words left his mouth than the injured Hars rushed out the door. Upon reaching the street, he immediately called out to 2 patrolling security officers, "Jeremy, gather 10 men and come with me." Half an hour later, enjoy exclusive content from Empire. When Hars arrived at the beach near the sea mouth with a number of security officers and night watchmen, they found the bloody mound already being scavenged by raptors. Everyone looked at the scene before their eyes in utter shock. Isn't this the ironback turtle with scaled whiskers, whose strength matched that of a great knight? Even though someone had removed its shell, it was immediately recognized by everyone. But then cheers erupted all around, because they knew that the trouble troubling Richmond Fishing Port had been resolved. Hars muttered to himself, "How could Rain be so strong? He's just a bit stronger than me, isn't he?" His assessment was only rated as good. Suddenly, something clicked for Hars, and his eyes shone with realization. It seems all this information was just my own imagination. On closer thought, Rain never actually directly answered any of these questions. At the home hotel of the Navy in Rossby City, on the training ground, Rain had declined my suggestion to spar, and later, during the endowment assessment. Now it seems I've made a truly formidable friend. What kind of strength would it take to kill an ironback turtle with scaled whiskers, whose strength is on par with a great knight? Moreover, Rain is still so young. "Captain Hars, I think you should see this," a security officer said with an uneasy expression. Hars walked over and saw a collection of neatly sliced, thick turtle shells laid out orderly on one side. Rain had indeed sent a message to Hars, but the security officers didn't know that. They had thought some other formidable wild beast had killed the ironback turtle with scaled whiskers, but now it was clear that wasn't the case. because a wild beast wouldn't slice open and neatly arranged turtle shells. So, for a moment, everyone was unsure how to deal with this mountain of meat and the valuable turtle shells, since by tradition, whoever made the kill had the right to own and distribute the spoils of battle. But upon seeing the neatly sliced, iconic shells of the ironback turtle with scaled whiskers, Hars immediately realized what Rain meant by finding a caravan to send him the turtle shell previously mentioned in the message. Haha, yes, it's got to be that guy Rain. Hars laughed heartily. With everything falling into place, Hars had no more doubts. At the same time, he understood that, while Rain asked him to send the turtle shell, he left no instructions for the heaps of fierce beast meat. Clearly, Rain intended to leave the disposal of the ironback turtle's corpse entirely up to him. Hastings became excited, for this was a vast fortune for him, Mace County City. Alonso had not been back from the prison to the estate for long when the butler Mitchell came up to him with a smiling face and reported, "Baron, I think you should take a look at this." Mitchell respectfully handed Alonso a thin stack of documents. Oh, upon seeing Mitchell's smiling face, Alonso knew there must be some good news in those documents. Indeed, after Alonso had received the documents and looked through them briefly, he quickly began to smile and said, "Is this news accurate?" "It has been verified and is true. My lord, according to the information, it seems that Baron Norman is determined to engage in a bloody duel with Rieni." After delivering the declaration of a bloody duel to Rieni's new residence, Baron Norman immediately submitted an application for a bloody duel to your father, Count Habs. Upon hearing this, Alonso's smile briefly faded as he said, "What did my father say?" After receiving the application for the bloody duel, Lord Count originally wanted to persuade Baron Norman to give up the duel, but was politely refused by the Baron. Mitchell said, smiling. Baron Norman didn't even give face to my father." Alonso was taken aback upon hearing this. Such a situation was extremely rare. Yes, it said that Baron Norman's strength has returned to its peak, and these past few days he has already begun to prepare the items necessary for breaking through to a great knight. It's very possible he plans to make the attempt right after the duel with Rieni. If he successfully breaks through, Baron Norman is likely to be promoted or to re-enlist with the Imperial Navy. Mitchell explained. Alonso nodded, understanding the situation, so that was Norman's plan. No wonder he could afford to disregard even his own father's influence. Ha ha ha, how interesting. Alonso suddenly laughed aloud. Since when did Rieni have such a deep feud with Baron Norman? If I had known this, I wouldn't have wasted so much time with Magi's. Alonso was well aware of Norman's background, an Imperial Navy veteran with extremely rich combat experience. If it weren't for an injury that had hindered his recovery, he would have had the chance to strive for the rank of Great Knight and the title of Imperial Navy Commodore. But now, he had retired with the rank of a Navy Colonel several years ago. "By the way, Mitchell, take 3 bottles of divine blood to Baron Norman and say it is a token of my goodwill," Alonso decided after a moment's thought. "As you command, my lord." Mitchell bowed and slowly withdrew from the room. However, not long after the butler Mitchell had left the room, he suddenly returned with a curious expression on his face. This made Alonso somewhat puzzled, and he asked, "Is there something else?" Baron, a secret message has come from Lord Marrel stating that Beast Knight Giovanni has recovered from his injuries and has declared that he will seek an opportunity to kill Rieni in the next few days." Upon hearing this news, Alonso's expression also turned strange. Soon followed by a barely controllable burst of loud laughter. Everything was good news since he returned. Alonso thought to himself, Rieni is really in demand. He's on the Black Flame Church's hit list and is also the target of Baron Norman's duel. I really wonder who will end up killing him. Mitchell, what do you think? Ha ha ha. This time not even the goddess of fortune can save him, Butler Mitchell said, laughing along. Exactly, not even the goddess can save him now. Besides those two, there's one last safeguard, Alonso said with conviction. This caused Butler Mitchell to look at his master with a puzzled expression. These two were already among the most powerful in Mace County. Could there be someone even stronger waiting in the wings? Beast Knight Giovanni, as the leader of the Wilderness Brotherhood, might only be a peak knight by rank, but his ability to transform into a beast made him a fierce opponent. When fully exerted, even a great knight might be challenged. With Baron Norman's strength returned to its peak, his might was likely even greater. His long career in the Navy had endowed him with vast combat experience. Furthermore, it was said that he intended to challenge the rank of Great Knight immediately after his bloody duel with Rieni, suggesting he was already on the brink of a breakthrough. But the Baron had invited a third person to be a backup. Against Rieni, someone whose abilities exceeded the other two. Read exclusive chapters at Empire. This made Mitchell's expression freeze. Could there truly be a Great Knight-level figure prepared to directly target Rieni? If so, Rieni might be talented, but he would be doomed still. Meanwhile, in Maest County, inside a study at the Crawley family estate, the beautiful woman, Jennifer, dressed in a one-shoulder pale purple gown adorned with intricate gold lace, sat behind the desk, sitting erect with an elegant posture. "Jenny, has there been any news from Rieni?" The beautiful woman's brow was furrowed with anxiety as she questioned her daughter. "Not yet, mother, don't worry yet," Jenny replied, seeing her mother's concern for Rieni, feeling an indescribable sourness in her heart. Rieni should have been, but now it seems he had become her mother's man. However, she quickly adjusted her mood and comforted her mother. "You know how strong Lord Rieni is. He was already very powerful, and since he has gone for further training this time, he's likely to become even stronger. So, I actually think that this Baron Norman may not necessarily be a match for Lord Rain." Despite her daughter's reassurance, the beautiful woman's brow was still marked with worry. Shaking her head, she said, "It's different. This opponent is not like any Rain has faced before. Baron Norman is from the same generation as your father. His strength is formidable. He once had the chance to attain the rank of Great Knight in his youth. But due to severe injuries sustained in naval combat, along with lingering internal wounds after healing, his attempt to become a Great Knight failed, leading to his retirement. Now, through some rare secret potion, he has recovered the combat capabilities of his peak years. Such an opponent, with his wealth of combat experience and formidable power, is probably unlike anyone Rain has ever encountered before," the woman explained with a look of concern. Hearing her mother explain this way, Jenny couldn't help but frown slightly. "Mother, why would this Baron Norman issue a bloody duel challenge to Lord Rain?" Jenny tried to comfort her mother in vain and changed the subject, as this question had also been on her mind for a while. Baron Norman, being of the same age as her father, would theoretically have little to do with Rain. How could he have suddenly issued a duel challenge to Rain? Fortunately, the guards at Rain's new residence were from her family's lineage. They recognized the importance of the situation immediately and reported to her mother first. Now, Rain's parents and sister are still unaware of this news. After discussing with her mother, she felt that informing them would only cause unnecessary worry. Of course, ultimately, it was up to Rain to decide what to do about this matter. "I'm not entirely sure of the specifics, but I sent someone to inquire about it, and this matter is beyond reconciliation. Along with issuing the challenge to Rain, Baron Norman has also filed a formal request with Count Habs," she explained. "Additionally, I've heard that he directly rejected Count Habs's attempt to dissuade him, which means that right from the start, he was determined to refuse any mediation and proceed with this bloody duel." Jenny suddenly found herself at a loss for words. How could there be such a deep hatred between two barons who are at least a generation apart in age? "Mother, is Baron Norman's current strength at the level of a peak knight, or have you investigated?" "Yes, he could be considered a peak knight, but the difference between him and a Great Knight is not that significant. I've bribed a servant from the Norman family and learned that he seems to be gearing up for an attempt to become a Great Knight in the next few days. He is currently preparing some necessary items. The exact timing, I'm still not quite sure." The beautiful woman added, "What if he succeeds, then what do we do?" Upon hearing this, Jenny couldn't help but cover her mouth with her small hand in shock. This made her worried as well. "You must understand, we are talking about a Great Knight here. Within a pool of dozens of formal knights, it's rare to find even one Great Knight. A Great Knight is a significant figure, whether within the Empire's military or its administrative bodies." 3 days later, discover hidden tales at Empire. After crossing this forest and traveling for another half a day, Rain would reach Maest County City. At the moment, along the narrow path stretching through the dense woods, scattered individuals could be seen. They were traveling in pairs of two, seemingly watching and searching for something. "Look, Haji, isn't that the man the Wilderness Brotherhood told us to keep an eye out for?" A thin middle-aged man asked his partner, tilting his head. "It should be a black horse, carrying 2 weapons, 1 greatsword and a 2-handed warhammer. Everything matches up." "Go report this," the man named Haji said with a pleased expression. Rain had noticed the occasional measuring glances cast his way, and after entering the forest, these glances had become more frequent. He knew that it wouldn't be long before the other party would make a move. As expected, not far ahead, a large group of individuals dressed as mercenaries, carrying all kinds of weapons, blocked his path. He, riding his horse, also slowly came to a halt. However, Rain merely swept a glance over these people before shifting his gaze away from them, focusing instead on a large carriage behind them. Although Rain couldn't see through the carriage, his level 3 danger perception was subtly alerting him to the threat. He knew that the real threat was inside, and that the group outside was just trash fish. In the carriage, a tall and lean figure sat, dressed in a gray knight's plate armor set. Even while seated, his height was close to 1.9 meters, and his knight helmet nearly touched the top of the carriage. Resting on his knees was an extremely strange, long-handled weapon, resembling an elongated sickle, with a handle about 1 meter long and the blade of the sickle itself also measuring a meter. Outside the carriage, a bearded burly man peered through a small window and said to the person inside, "Chief Joe, if we kill this kid, do we really get a reward of 2,000 imperial gold coins?" As the burly man asked, he looked at Rain's youthful face, and his eyes flickered with the desire for money. "Hey, Captain Sim, are you interested in having a go? Of course, if your wolf bandits can take him down, 2,000 imperial gold coins is yours to keep," said Giovanni from within the armor, a meaningful smile crossing his hidden face. He would naturally welcome someone else taking the lead. "Chief Joe, leave it to us," said the bearded burly man, confidently patting his chest. The bearded strongman, holding a longsword, swung his arm and said, "Go kill him." As soon as he spoke, he took the lead and charged forward, being one of the strongest bandits in the Wild Wolf Hills and a rare veteran knight. His band of bandits was even named after the wild wolves of Wild Wolf Hills, a testament to his confidence and ambition. With money, he could expand his team and improve their weapons and equipment. Furthermore, completing this mission would deepen his cooperation with the Brotherhood of the Wilderness. It would kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so the bearded man was naturally very committed. When over 20 men dressed as mercenaries saw their leader charging, their morale instantly surged. Their faces flushed as they screamed and excitedly rushed towards Rain. Several crossbow arrows were shot at Rain before the others could even reach him. Facing the oncoming rush, Rain drew his greatsword, still keeping his gaze steady. Swoosh, swoosh, his figure moved slightly, and with a couple of shifts he dodged the incoming crossbow arrows. "Attack, kill him." A few leaders of the Wild Wolf bandits hesitated, realizing the tough character they faced, but fueled by their superior numbers, they continued to roar and swung their weapons at Rain. Suddenly, Rain's chest suddenly puffed up, much like a frog inflates when it croaks. Most notably, his swelling neck seemed like it harbored a steam-powered locomotive inside his chest, unable to contain the surging, high-temperature steam about to burst forth from his swollen neck. Sure enough, the next second, a huge gust of air, similar to a train's whistle, roared out of Rain's widely opened mouth. Roar. A roar that was much louder than all of their screams combined resounded. It left every charging bandit from the Wild Wolf bandits in shock, realizing they were in trouble. They tried desperately to stop their charge, but as the thought emerged in their minds, the wide-ranging sonic attack was already upon them. When facing the sonic attack, the only escape would be outpacing the speed of sound. But clearly, that was impossible for the bandits. Instantly, a loud explosion blasted next to every bandit's ears. Most were immediately dazed, some even rolled their eyes and their minds blanked out. Their facial skin under the subsequent shockwave was repeatedly stretched, trembled, and deformed. Immediately after, screams rang out high and low. "Ah, ah!" And within seconds after the loud explosion, most bandits were seen clutching their ears, displaying expressions of unbearable pain. Their ears and brains were still buzzing, unable to recover quickly. Even Giovanni in the carriage squinted, muttering, "Sonic attack, huh, not a bad move." But oddly enough, the cries of agony in the area began to decrease. A gray shadow gripping a greatsword, like a high-speed sewing machine needle, darted back and forth among the 20-some bandits. The hiss-hiss-hiss sound of air being sliced continued without pause. Seconds later, not one member of the Wild Wolf bandit gang, including their leader with the beard, was left standing. It had all been cut into segments and lay strewn across the field. Rain shook the glimmering greatsword, tossing off the crimson bloodstains, while his eyes remained fixed on the large carriage without shifting. The reason for using the roaring strike as his Opening move, part of the explanation lay here. There was a formidable opponent on the sidelines, watching intently. The longer the fight dragged out, the more disadvantageous it would be, not to mention the potential for a sneak attack at any moment. Clap, clap, clap. Crisp applause emerged from within the carriage. Impressive strength. I thought you would at least get injured, but it seems I underestimated your level. However, it doesn't really matter. Your outcome won't change much. Along with a deep voice, a tall, slender knight, over 2 meters in height, holding a scythe-like weapon, slowly descended from the carriage. Rain's eyes narrowed, focusing on the newcomer. It seems that he was indeed the main opponent for today. The gray chest armor of the knight featured 3 dull, burning black flames, instantly reminding Rain of those black flame monks he had killed before. 3 black flames. It seems he was a personage in the black flame cult, Rain thought to himself. Moreover, judging from the aura, the opponent wasn't a great knight. Moreover, his own level 3 danger perception alert wasn't strong enough to be unbeatable by him. This slightly settled Rain's mind. Perhaps, if he had not gone to Master Ganther to improve, he might have been outmatched by this individual. But now, it seemed they were rather evenly matched. Of course, it was likely that the opponent had some tricks up his sleeve. But didn't he have his own? Seeing Rain's calm demeanor made Giovanni slightly bored, shaking his head. I enjoy the frenzy and screams of my prey before they die. You're too calm, I don't like it. Stay connected through Empire. Or perhaps you don't think you can escape this time, do you? Last time, if not for that druid. Forget it, let's not talk about that. Seemingly recalling the previous encounter made Giovanni's expression change under his helmet, leading him to abruptly cut off his words. Rain understood. The guy in front of him was someone he had never seen before. When the other mentioned druid last time, was he talking about a druid? It seemed that at some point in the past, Anna's aunt, the elf lady, had repelled him. That's what Rain speculated. Are you from the dark cult? Rain asked for the first time. Not bad, you figured it out, but I don't have much time to chit-chat with you. Even though this place is remote, there are still occasionally trade caravans passing by, and it wouldn't be good for them to see you, the Baron, dead by my hand, he said. I promised the High Priest that I would make you, the newly appointed Baron, disappear without a trace, he added. As soon as he finished speaking, Giovanni flicked the bizarrely shaped sickle in his hand, as if to attack. But then he stopped abruptly, intrigued by what Rain said next. Actually, I'm quite happy to have run into you today, Rain said, his eyelids lowered, his expression serene. Oh, why is that? Giovanni, surprised by Rain's unexpected response, paused his movement and asked with curiosity. Because I just learned something new and have been looking for a worthy opponent to try it out on. The savage beasts I've faced so far just lack that certain something, so I'm quite happy to meet you, Rain said as he raised his head, his eyes sparkling with eagerness. At this moment, Giovanni felt very uncomfortable, as Rain's look made him feel as if he were the prey and Rain was the hunter. I didn't expect you, the new Baron, to be one for big talk. Now you can die. As a punishment, I'll make your death even more painful. Suddenly, black flames like tendrils wrapped around Giovanni's armored body and his bizarrely shaped sickle as if it were a chain. Rain's gaze sharpened as he witnessed this technique for the first time. It seemed to enhance both defense and attach that weapon with added offensive capabilities. This must be some kind of dark magic from the dark cult, even more powerful than a black fireball. But you have your dark magic and I have witchcraft, Rain thought to himself. High-temperature force field. Chanting silently, Rain quickly generated a spherical field of high-temperature force around him. The high-temperature force field, invisible and intangible, still caused Giovanni to pause slightly at the energy fluctuations emanating from Rain. Interesting, haha, I didn't think you know witchcraft too. Now killing you will be even more fun, Giovanni said. With a swoosh, Giovanni's feet touched the ground, shattering it. The sound of him slicing through air was sharp as he lunged at Rain. So fast. Rain's pupils narrowed, and he quickly raised his sword to block. With disdain evident, Giovanni aimed a swift cut with his sickle at Rain's neck. Considering the speed Rain had just shown in the fight, it was too slow, and he surely couldn't withstand this strike, even if he hadn't activated his break limit. And even if he had, by how much could it really improve? 70%, 80%, it wouldn't change the outcome. Yet bizarrely, Rain's speed suddenly almost doubled, precisely intercepting the blow. Clang, sparks flew. Giovanni, failing to land his strike, retreated several meters and said in a deep voice, 90%. It turns out Rain had instantly activated break limit just before. Rain was aware that Giovanni was surprised by the level of his break limit, how high it was to reach 90%. But the fight had already begun, and only a fool would care for such an inquiry from the enemy. Without considering it, Rain took the opportunity of his opponent's halted momentum to launch a counterattack. Clang, clang, clang. Both were extremely fast, like two wisps of smoke twirling around the path, sparks flying and the sound of clashing metal ringing incessantly. Sometimes, as they fought off the path and into the forest, it was the trees that bore the brunt. Trees as thick as bowls were cut down in an instant by their continuous strikes, falling amidst a cacophony of crashing sounds. Yet Rain realized that his witchcraft, high-temperature force field had not been as effective as it should have been, clearly because the black flames ensnaring Giovanni's body had blocked his witchcraft's damage. Seeing Rain's speed nearly double after using break limit, Giovanni knew that the reason Rain had escaped the church's assassinations time and again was due to genuine skill. That was no empty bragging. While his speed was still superior to Rain's, the prospect of ending the fight as easily as a cat toying with a mouse was now impossible. However, this only made Giovanni secretly more excited. To extinguish a genius was indeed more thrilling than eliminating an ordinary expert. Swoosh! Giovanni's speed surged again, an indication he had activated his transcendent trait. SSS! The sickle in his hand sped up so rapidly that its shadow was almost invisible. Despite Rain's best efforts to dodge, he was still struck and sent flying. Tusk, to have your break limit surpass 90% at your age, I must admit you are a rare knight genius, Giovanni remarked. But, as I said, your end will not change. Giovanni looked at Rain, speaking mockingly. Explore new worlds at Empire. Rain had retreated 3 steps before he abruptly stood, firm, glancing down at his chest, where a deep scratch had already appeared on the chromite armor's breastplate, now completely ripped open. If it hadn't been for his level 3 transcendent trait Iron Skin protecting him, that hit would have injured him. The long-handled, odd-shaped scythe in the opponent's hand was no ordinary weapon, and combined with the weird enhancement of black flames, its deadliness was substantial. Before such lethal weaponry, the chromite suit was barely stronger than a thick piece of paper. Moreover, his opponent was a speed-type knight. And not just any ordinary speed-type knight. Though wearing shin guards, the length of his calves and their tightly fitting condition allowed Rain to instantly discern that the opponent's Achilles tendons were extremely slender, even more taut and sturdy than those of the former sprinter, Bolt. Indeed, the opponent's speed was extraordinarily rapid. Thinking it through, Rain directly ripped open the damaged knight's chestplate, throwing it onto the ground with a thud, and likewise removed his leg armor and the rest. Giovanni, on the other hand, watched Rain with a confident and somewhat condescending expression. After a moment, as if he had understood something, he said, Interesting. You don't think that shedding this 100+ pounds of knight armor will let you catch up to my speed, do you? Such fanciful thinking, but just one light slash from me, and without your knight armor to protect you, your body will hiss and split into 2. Seeing Rain's interesting action, Giovanni watched him with a look of come on, show me, interestedly observing Rain but not hurrying to act. Sure enough, after shedding his chromite suit, Rain wasn't done yet. He placed the glimmering greatsword heavily into the ground, and then pulled out a warhammer with his other hand. Because for the current Rain, with a level 3 specialization in hammer skill, a hammer was indeed his #1 weapon. However, Giovanni was unaware of this detail. He shook his head and said, If you are after reduced weight, the hammer in your hand is obviously heavier than the sword. I really don't understand your thinking. But having taken off the 100+ pounds of knight armor, and having put down his 70–80 pounds glimmering greatsword, Rain wielding the warhammer felt an indescribable lightness. He felt as if he might float away, as though he could fly just by jumping. Swoosh! A figure wielding a hammer rushed towards Giovanni rapidly. Rain's speed had clearly increased by more than 20%. Giovanni sneered and with a swoosh disappeared from his original position. Clang! The next second he couldn't laugh anymore, for as his odd-shaped scythe clashed with Rain's warhammer, a shock wave was transmitted instantly, causing him to freeze slightly, unprepared. Following that, Rain's subsequent relentless barrage of hammer attacks, like hailstones crashing down, fiercely smashed towards Giovanni. Giant hammer strike, strike again and again. Giant hammer jump strike. Giant hammer sweep. Clang, clang, clang. Although Giovanni's odd-shaped scythe was not ordinary and remained undamaged, Every block made Giovanni's form stagger slightly due to the shock, nearly completely negating his speed advantage. Rain's tide like offensive left Giovanni unable to mount a counterattack, forced to constantly defend and block again and again. Boom, finally, Giovanni showed a flaw and Rain struck his chest with the hammer. Although protected by black flames and a swift retreat that absorbed some of the force, the hit still cracked his chest plate and forced him to stagger back over a dozen steps. Giovanni's slender legs dug 2 long trenches in the ground before he barely steadied himself. Enough, it's time to end this. Giovanni removed his helmet in one motion, revealing a slightly angry and flushed face. Although he had sufficiently overestimated Rain, he hadn't expected that besides mastering the dual-handed greatsword, Rain was even stronger with the 2-handed warhammer, almost surpassing master level. This was utterly incomprehensible to him. Even if Rain had started practicing hammer skill and swordsmanship from the age of 1, it wasn't possible to reach this level with both weapons. If this was talent, it was incredibly unbelievable. Giovanni also realized if he didn't bring out his trump card with his enormous physical exertion, he might really not be able to defeat the current Rain, since he had activated his limit breaker and transcendent traits, which consumed more energy than Rain, who had only activated his limit breaker. The next second he roared, "Beastify!" Giovanni's figure began to undergo violent changes. All over his body hair began to grow rapidly like wildfire, his face contorted and changed shape, his upper and lower jaws jutted out swiftly, sharp fangs suddenly protruded, and his hands transformed into claw-like shapes, yet still clutching his odd-shaped side. Here's a transformation into Wolverine. Rain was both surprised and somewhat excited in his heart. Discover more content at Empire. This was the first time he had encountered an enemy who could transform. "Now you can peacefully return to the goddess's embrace," said Giovanni, now with a wolf's head, pausing at every word. Whoosh! His figure suddenly disappeared from the spot. The next second a clang of metal clashing sounded where Rain was standing. Rain was knocked back more than 10 meters by his opponent's heavy cleave. After the transformation, the opponent's speed and strength were further enhanced. The speed had reached a level that was difficult for the naked eye to catch. Although Rain had strong dynamic vision and was still able to capture the movements of the opponent, his own limbs reacted a bit too slowly, so he was at a slight disadvantage in the earlier exchange. "You have no chance now." Clang clang. Although Rain was also extremely fast, he was still a bit slower compared to the transformed Giovanni. From a closer perspective, one could see Rain's figure flickering uncertainly, but one could still make out his humanoid shape. As for Giovanni, one couldn't see him at all and could only hear his incessant talking. The whole combat scene gave the onlookers a strange feeling, as if Rain was fighting with some blurry, unseen entity around him. Every second, sparks from metallic collisions and piercing, clanging sounds occurred multiple times around Rain, but one couldn't see who Rain's enemy was. Too slow, too slow. Rain, you're too slow. Ha ha ha, you're so slow that you're going to die here. Giovanni burst into a mad laughter. Rain remained calm, listening to Giovanni's crazed laughter, and couldn't help but exclaim in his heart, "It seems that I need to add some agility. Originally, I wanted to reserve it for spirit, to complete the visualization of all 24 will runes of the basic meditation method in one go. Read the latest on Empire." What a pity. As Rain looked up at Giovanni, the attribute points on his panel dropped from 3 to 2 in an instant, and his agility surged from 19 to 20. Now his agility too had crossed the crucial threshold of 20. At the same time, Rain's strength, agility, and constitution, all 3 basic attributes, met the prerequisite condition of having each attribute reach or exceed 20 required for the Weapon Master legendary class change. In an instant, Rain felt the fatigue and soreness in his muscles, which had started to set in, vanish completely. His body returned to its peak condition in a flash. Moreover, the slight increase in speed and dynamic vision that came with the improved agility enabled Rain to keep up with the opponent's attack rhythm. Perhaps he was still a bit slower, but the gap had clearly narrowed. At this moment, after 3 or 4 minutes of intense combat, any minor change in movements was quickly perceived by the opponent. Soon, Giovanni sensed something was wrong. Since just now, Rain's hammer swings had become incredibly smooth, with no tremor in his hands, as if he hadn't tired at all since the fight began. But how could this be? Giovanni, engaged in fierce combat, couldn't afford to be distracted with detailed thoughts, but could generally speculate. Was Rain holding back all this time? No. That was absolutely impossible. Therefore, there was only one other possibility. This was one of Rain's night talents, an extraordinary form of stamina or endurance. But wasn't Rain's talent too much to handle? Masterful at swordsmanship, his hammer skill almost surpassing mastery, plus a special trait for physical endurance. Giovanni felt his understanding of talent had been redefined. But soon, he noticed something even more astonishing and baffling, because he found that Rain's speed seemed to have increased, although it was just a little bit, probably not even half of 10%. But he wasn't mistaken. The other's speed indeed had increased. If it were only the abnormal stamina that could be understood, but increasing speed, what was going on? Giovanni felt his brain wasn't quite up to the task. Could it be that he was slowing down due to excessive stamina depletion, and so, relatively, it gave him the illusion that Rain's speed had increased? Yes, this was the only explanation that seemed more reasonable. Giovanni's mind became chaotic, and Rain, his opponent, sensed it immediately. At this moment, Rain's conviction was extraordinarily firm. What an opportunity. The next second, as Rain silently recited, huge strength LV3, strength burst. In an instant, Rain felt a strong rush of heat pumping from his heart, speeding up his bloodstream, causing his veins to bulge, and his muscles to swell dramatically, making his figure suddenly enlarge. Rain raised the unstoppable force in his hands high, and with the force of lightning, he smashed down heavily on Giovanni. Not good. Facing Rain's full power strike, even Giovanni, who was as strong as a great knight in his werewolf form, had to choose to retreat rather than withstand the blow. Seeing the dark hammerhead brush past his nose by just 20 or 30 centimeters, Giovanni felt a surge of joy. He had missed, but just as Giovanni thought, he had jumped out of the range of Rain's attack. Rain's hammer heavily struck the ground less than half a meter in front of Giovanni, in Giovanni's astonished gaze. Boom! Instantly, a powerful shockwave radiated out from the hammerhead, sweeping towards Giovanni in a fan-shaped motion with lightning speed. Earth-splitting hammer. Half a minute earlier, a carriage guarded by several knights had just turned the corner of the winding forest path and caught sight of Rain's powerful hammer strike. The knights who witnessed this scene all had their expressions dramatically change, while at that moment, the curtains of the carriage window were pulled back slightly. Underneath the hood was a beautiful young face, curiously watching in the direction of Rain, when suddenly, a pair of eyes uncontrollably widened, and the cherry-like mouth quickly formed into an O shape. What came into the young maiden's view was a huge humanoid creature, with muscles so swollen it was ridiculous, holding a dark iron hammer high and striking the ground heavily, as if the earth itself was fracturing and sending shockwaves through everyone's hearts. In an instant, the ground cracked open inch by inch. An invisible shock force spread out rapidly from the point of impact. The stones and gravel on the ground, upon encountering this shock force, were instantly reduced to dust. So, with a face full of panic and a bit of confusion, Beast Knight Giovanni took the full brunt of this intense shock force. Even though he was protected by plate armor, even though he was shielded by vine-like living tendrils of black flame, he still stood frozen in place for about half a second under Rain's full-powered strike. When high-skilled combatants clash, the situation can change in the blink of an eye. Half a second might only be enough time for a normal person to throw a punch, but for Rain, it was enough to deliver at least 3 forceful and powerful hammers. Bang, bang. The third strike was even followed by a secret Tokkul hammer technique move, the Rising Dragon Hammer. Rain twisted his body and swung his hips, channeling the strength of his core muscles, swinging his hands to create a dark afterimage that moved from the bottom upwards, severely striking Giovanni's wolf-jawed chin. Crack! Giovanni's wolf-jawed chin was directly shattered, and at the same time, his entire body was thrown 4 or 5 meters upwards, his eyes rolling back in his head. But it still wasn't over. Rain kicked off the ground and quickly followed Giovanni's convulsing body in mid-air, delivering a rapid series of hammer blows. Bang, bang, bang. With each hammer blow, the black flame tendrils on Giovanni's body grew dimmer, his plate armor shattered piece by piece, and the sound of breaking bones rang out clearly. These shattering sounds were akin to firecrackers, popping non-stop. Thud! The sound of a heavy object hitting the ground was heard. This was because Rain had interrupted his continuous hammering, causing Giovanni's body to heavily crash to the ground. Despite having the vitality of a great knight in his beast form, Giovanni's body still twitched violently, but was clearly in its final throes. His wolf mouth damaged beyond recognition, spewing blood, his whole body showing various odd twists. From his posture, it was highly likely that there wasn't a single bone intact in his entire body, lying on the ground like a pile of mud. Giovanni's body was rapidly changing, the black fur receding, his face shifting from that of a wolf to that of a man. But the crushing injuries to his jaw and the fractures throughout his body did not heal as a result. Soon, a human corpse lay before Rain. And there stood Rain, holding his hammer. Breathing heavily, the outburst of his full strength had greatly exhausted him. However, his eyes shone brightly at that moment. For Rain, an opponent of this strength was too rare, and this battle was exhilarating. He had exerted all his recent improvements and thoroughly tested them in this fight. However, neither Rain nor the people with the carriage noticed that, perched on a tall tree in the distant forest, there was a lean man in patterned leather armor, holding a bronze telescope, observing the situation here. Upon seeing Rain killed Giovanni, he was shocked and muttered to himself, "Impossible. How can this Rain be so strong? This is, after all, the leader of the Wilderness Brothers, known as Beast Knight Giovanni, who was killed by an obscure young man. Earlier, I thought the Baron was overreacting, but now it seems I've underestimated Rain. Find your next read at Empire. I must report to Baron Alonso immediately." The lean man moved as swiftly as a monkey, quickly descending from the tree and disappearing in the direction of the county town after a few strides. After a while, the girl in the carriage finally regained her composure, and with a voice as clear as that of an oriole, turned her head and asked, "Knight Lawrence, how strong is this person?" "Very strong." "No, extremely strong," replied the knight clad in knight armor solemnly, glancing at Rain. "Stronger than you?" the young maiden inquired, puzzled. "Yes, if I'm not mistaken, his opponent just now should be the leader of the Wilderness Brothers, known as Beast Knight Giovanni, who is said to have escaped from the hands of great knights several times," the middle-aged Knight Lawrence remarked with a touch of reflection. "I never imagined he would meet his end here." "That's strong," the girl exclaimed in surprise, covering her mouth. While she didn't know who the Beast Knight was, she did know what a great knight was the most formidable warriors, against whom even her family's strongest fighters could not contend. If a young man could kill such a formidable person, his strength was unimaginable. "Then, Knight Lawrence, in your opinion, who is stronger father's friend, Lord Hamilton, whom he mentioned last time, who might be able to deal with that issue, or this young man?" "This? I haven't met that young man before, so I'm also unable to make a judgment." Lawrence thought for a moment and wisely replied. But in his heart, he was thinking, how could there possibly be someone more impressive than this young man in front of him? He had never even heard of such an impressive young man, let alone met one. At that time, Rain glanced at the system prompt. "Your skill toggle hammer technique has improved. Experience plus 1034. Your skill giant bear sword technique has improved. Experience plus 232. Your skill high temperature field has improved. Experience plus 12. You have been through a battle, Knight Transcendent. Experience plus 298. Wizard Apprentice, Transcendent. Experience plus 13. In the recent battle, Rain used the hammer technique most frequently and swordsmanship next, hence the distribution of the experience, with hammer technique taking the lion's share. Additionally, the level of Knight Transcendent reached LV5 795/2000, and toggle hammer technique was raised to LV7 2724/5000, with the experience now more than halfway there. The remaining attribute points, since he added 1 point to agility during the battle, were now only 2 points left, with the remaining skill points unchanged at 1 point. It was then that the sharp-eyed Rain suddenly noticed that, among the muddy remains of the corpse, a damaged pouch had fallen. This made Rain's heart stir slightly. What could it be that someone of such high caliber would carry with them? He stepped forward to open the pouch and saw inside a token made of an unknown metal. The design was 3 black flames burning fiercely, which looked very similar to the Angel Envoy token he had previously obtained from killing the Black Flame Apostle. It must have been a form of identity recognition within the Black Flame Church. Rain shook his head slightly, finding it of little use to himself, although the Goddess Church seemed to attach great importance to it. What's this?" Inside the pouch, there was also a special beastskin scroll. Rain carefully unrolled it and saw that it was filled with prayers written in Lingwen. After some thought, Rain concluded that this must be a prayer used for some kind of cult ritual, which still wasn't very useful to him. This was somewhat disappointing to Rain, for he had been quite hopeful about his spoils of war, but didn't expect there to be only these 2 items. However, all of a sudden Rain's eyes lit up, as if he had thought of something, and he muttered to himself, "Perhaps the goddess church would like this gift." Rain glanced from afar at the merchant caravan that was too afraid to approach because of the corner, paying them no mind. He dragged the man who could transform into a werewolf, along with the man's signature weapon, and threw them onto the wagon. As for the previously hesitating caravan, upon seeing Rain return to his normal size and tidy up the battlefield, it seemed that they deemed Rain not a bad person, so they slowly approached from behind. However, Rain had no interest in interacting with strangers at this juncture, so he mounted his black horse, drove the cart and the chestnut horse, and headed quickly to the county town. Upon entering the county town, Rain did not go straight home, but first visited the wind and ocean goddess temple that he had never been to before. The tall and majestic temple could be seen from afar, supported by more than a dozen tall columns that greatly resembled the Ionic style of his previous world. A distinct feature of this column style was that the top of each column had 2 symmetrical scrolls in a volutes pattern, with a small decorative band in between, making the whole design quite conspicuous and beautiful. It also matched well with the gentle temperament of the goddess. Along the cascading steps in front of the temple was a circular fountain, with in its center a statue of a beautiful woman holding a conch shell, standing about 3 meters tall. The water gushed tirelessly from the conch in the goddess's hand, forming a miniature waterfall that fell straight down. A row of holy guards clad in silver armor stood guard all around. Upon seeing the formidable-looking Rain riding on a tall black warhorse, they exchanged glances, then immediately approached and asked, "Sir Knight, may I ask what brings you to the goddess church?" The holy guards had already noticed Rain's presence as soon as he appeared at the corner of the road. First, it was Rain's tall and outstanding black warhorse, and secondly, Rain's own aura of having just slain the Beast Knight, which made the hearts of these holy guards, none of whom were as strong as official knights, tremble a bit. If it weren't for their strong faith in the goddess, they might have already felt cowardly. "Is Rudolph the presbyter here?" Rain asked with a slight smile and very politely. "You know Presbyter Rudolph. The presbyter just returned yesterday. May I ask your name? I will announce you," said the holy guard, who heard Rain seem to know Presbyter Rudolph, visibly relaxing. "You can tell Presbyter Rudolph that Rain is visiting." "Very well, Lord Rain." Experience exclusive tales on Empire. The holy guard quickly ascended the steps and ran toward the temple interior. In a moment, an old man in a water-blue robe with golden trimmings, holding a thick book, came out from the temple. Upon seeing the old man appear, Rain smiled and dismounted from his warhorse. Rudolph also saw Rain riding the tall black warhorse and smiled, greeting him. "Now, I suppose I can call you Baron Rain." The surrounding holy guards were stunned, wearing expressions of astonishment. So young and already a baron. They had thought it was some skilled knight, but to their surprise, it turned out to be an imperial baron, and such a young one at that. Indeed, a rare sight. Rain smiled and said, "Abbot, you flatter me. You may still call me Rain." At the same time, Rain nodded slightly to the 2 holy temple knights standing behind Rudolph as a sign of greeting. The 2 of them had fought together in the last battle in the Nightingale Forest, so they were familiar. One of them seemed to be called Magini. Rain remembered him. "Baron, sir." The 2 holy temple knights bowed slightly and said, "Abbot, there's something that might trouble you this time." Rain turned his head to signal the large carriage behind him, and then he fell silent. Rudolph, seasoned and shrewd, immediately understood Rain's meaning and said, "Baron Rain, please come to my place." Following that, he gestured to the 2 holy temple knights to lead the carriage into the temple grounds. It wasn't until they reached the front courtyard of the temple that Rain's expression turned solemn. "Abbot, on the way back to the county town, I was assassinated by the Black Flame cult. Perhaps you should take a look at the assailant's body first." "What? Assassinated?" Rudolph's face changed, and he immediately gestured to the 2 holy temple knights to open the carriage. The 2 holy temple knights opened the carriage door and carried out the tall and thin body of the Beast Knight. However, as soon as they lifted the body, they realized it was like a pile of sludge, its bones nearly shattered, sagging heavily downwards. Next to it was a characteristic weapon, a bizarrely shaped scythe. The 2 holy temple knights exchanged a glance. Such formidable hammer skill. one of the knights exclaimed. He also practiced hammer skill, so he recognized at first glance that the wounds on the body and its sludge-like condition were clearly caused by extremely powerful hammer skill. This level of mastery in applying the force of shock, without decades of hard practice, was impossible to achieve, and this Baron Rain is so young. The Holy Temple Knight glanced at Rain, filled with immense astonishment. This is Giovanni. Abbot Rudolph looked at the body and the characteristic weapon beside it, a long-handled, oddly shaped scythe, and his eyes narrowed suddenly. Although he maintained a calm facade, he was incredibly shocked inwardly. This man was the leader of the Wilderness Brotherhood, involved in many of the dirty, underhanded dealings behind the scenes. Indeed, the Goddess Church had long wanted to remove this cancer, but due to strong opposition from many nobles within the county town, and lacking clear evidence of the group being controlled by a cult, the matter had been postponed. Moreover, Giovanni was quite powerful in his own right, able to hold his own against a great knight after transforming. Rudolph never expected him to die at Rain's hand. Rain managing to kill him, doesn't that imply that Rain? At that moment, Rudolph connected the dots. This is the Wilderness Brotherhood's leader Giovanni, also known as Beast Knight. Rain, was it he who attacked you? Rudolph asked in surprise, looking at Rain. That's correct, Abbot. However, you might find his other identity more interesting. While speaking, Rain took out from his bosom a diamond-shaped token with 3 black flame-like insignias and a prayer written in Lingwan script, presenting it before the 3 of them. Black Flame Guardian's token and Black Flame Protection. Prayer, Rudolph exclaimed, his eyes widening as he took a closer look. What? The 2 Holy Temple Knights inhaled sharply. It's actually a Black Flame Guardian's token. They looked at each other, both seeing the shock in the other's eyes. The exclamations of the group, particularly the normally composed Abbot Rudolph, immediately drew the attention of the Holy Temple Knights and guards practicing combat skills in the temple courtyard. Rain then looked at Rudolph and the 2 Holy Temple Knights, asking in confusion, what is a Black Flame Guardian? I remember the last time I killed a Black Flame Apostle, I also found a Black Flame token. However, that had 1 black flame. This one with 3 black flames seems to be a level higher than the Apostles. Read new chapters at Empire. You're right, Rain. The rank of this Black Flame Guardian is second only to the High Priest of the Black Flame. Not only are they very strong, but they also keep their identities concealed. We knew before that there were 2 Black Flame Guardians within the cult, but we never knew who they were, Rudolph sighed. Never would I have imagined that the Wilderness Brotherhood's leader Giovanni was actually a Black Flame Guardian. Although he found it hard to believe that this young-looking youth had caused the death of a Black Flame Guardian, considering Rain's feats of killing a Black Flame Apostle before, it seemed to remind him repeatedly that this was reasonable. Moreover, this Black Flame Guardian's token and Black Flame Protection prayer were the best proof. For the Goddess Church, this was obviously a great opportunity. With the leader of the Wilderness Brotherhood killed, now was the best time to conduct a cleanup operation. Magini, assemble the team immediately. I will report to the Archbishop, and we must begin cleaning up the Wilderness Brotherhood at once. Selkin, take these 2 items to the Archbishop and report the situation as well. After thinking it over, Rudolph promptly gave orders. Rain, perhaps you should meet with the Archbishop. I believe Archbishop Shin will be very pleased to see you. Rudolph turned to Rain and said. Rain thought for a moment, then quickly nodded and said, I'm very honored, then I'll trouble you. His purpose for coming to the church this time was to seek support from the church. However, he hadn't expected to receive a personal audience with the highest official of the county town church, Bishop Shin. Because Rain was considering his imminent bloody duel with Baron Norman, he temporarily didn't want to be distracted by dealing with the Black Flame cult. In the county town, if he could get the support of the Goddess Church, it would mean his family's safety was doubly ensured, which would relieve some of his worries. After all, in matters of mysterious curses and the like, the Goddess Church's protective and responsive measures were much more adept than his own. Watching Rain and Rudolph's departing figures, many young temple knights and guards in the front yard of the temple whispered amongst themselves, the Guardian of Black Flame, Tisk. It seems that we have never killed such a high-ranking member of the Black Flame cult, have we? Yes. It is said that the strength of the Guardian of Black Flame is even above that of a peak knight. This young man's strength is too strong. Rain, the one who's been the talk of the town, Baron Norman's opponent in a duel. So he is Rain. Clearly, as followers of the divine, Church people understood better than outsiders the true value of killing a guardian of the Black Flame, and the extreme difficulty involved. Although these words also faintly reached the ears of Rain, who was departing, because the feud between him and the Black Flame cult had become irreconcilable, Rain wasn't too concerned about whether this news leaked out or not. Soon, Rain arrived at the central area of the temple, which was a tall and magnificent hall with high vaulted ceilings adorned all around and at the top, with various bas-reliefs and murals deeply related to the goddess. There stood an elderly man dressed in a water-blue robe with coarse golden trimmings, holding a staff, smiling kindly at Rain as he entered the hall. The man's hair was graying, suggesting great age, yet he appeared very spirited. Rain raised his eyebrows slightly and proactively stepped forward to greet him. "Bishop, it is an honor to meet you." "Hello, my child." Bishop Shen approached amiably and gave Rain a gentle hug. "I've heard from Rudolph that you killed a guardian of the Black Flame cult. Child, whatever you require, feel free to ask me." Rain was not dealing with the Goddess Church for the first time. He was already aware of the situation in the Dragon Empire, where imperial authority and divine authority were exercised in tandem, although, under the current circumstances, imperial authority was somewhat stronger. But with the status of a bishop, his standing in the entire Meister County could be said to be second only to Earl Habs, the governor, and even when it came to eradicating cults, the bishop's opinion carried more weight, which was also a kind of tacit understanding between the Empire and the Goddess Church. Read exclusive content at Empire for such an important figure to be willing to meet with him was far better than Rain had anticipated. Originally, he merely wanted to mention the matter to Rudolph, whom he was familiar with, and incidentally gain favor with the church, but he hadn't expected to directly attract the attention of the county town Goddess Church's bishop. Since the great personage had initiated the conversation, Rain thought it appropriate to make a suggestion at the right time. "Bishop, it is my unquestionable duty to slay cultists. However, I am a bit worried about the safety of my family in the county town. As you know, some of the cult's sorcery is unpredictable and difficult to guard against." "Ha ha, so you're worried about that." Rudolph arranged for 2 temple guards to go to Rain's mansion later and set up a divine arts array detect evil. Once the array is triggered, the temple will sense it here, and then we will be able to quickly dispatch church forces to help, said Bishop Shen, turning to talk to Rain. Rudolph timely added, lately, there have been many mysterious and cult-related incidents, which have involved a lot of our manpower. Otherwise, we wouldn't have sent only 2 temple guards. Rain nodded in understanding. Furthermore, having temple knights stationed in his mansion all the time would actually make him feel a bit uncomfortable, almost as if he was being given undue attention after all. Each temple knight possessed the strength of a formal knight, which would be more suitable if he were an earl. By the way, there has been a lot of buzz in the county town these past few days, saying that Baron Norman is seeking a bloody duel with you. Child, do you need the church to intervene and negotiate on your behalf? Bishop Shen said, remembering something and offering help proactively. Thank you for your concern, Bishop. My confrontation with Baron Norman is inevitable, and I am looking forward to this duel. Rain replied, well then, may the goddess protect you. Child, this is a silver conch medal from the Goddess Church, bestowed to those who have made outstanding contributions in driving out evil. Considering your battles with the cultists, both previous and recent, I think you have ample reason to receive this medal. As Bishop Shen spoke, he took from a tray held by an attendant beside him a medal the size of a child's fist, shining with a silver glow. There was an exceptionally clear conch pattern on it, lifelike. Thank you, Goddess, and thank you, Bishop. Baron Rain carefully accepted it and wore it on the inside lining. Baron Rain, please keep this medal safe, in any place within the Empire. As long as there is a temple of the Church of the Sea Goddess and the Monsoon, you can seek and receive help. Additionally, this medal has solidified a divine art that detects evil. When evil approaches, it will vibrate slightly to warn you, Rudolph explained at the side. Rain nodded and gave Bishop Shen a slight bow again to express his gratitude. Furthermore, considering you will soon be facing battle, I have a blessing from the goddess, which might be of help to you, Bishop Shen said to Rain, smiling. A blessing? Rain was taken aback, but Rudolph at his side was giving him meaningful looks, signaling Rain to accept it. Rain thought it over and nodded, saying, then, I am in your debt, Bishop. Originally, Rain was somewhat wary of such blessings from gods, but then he thought that his system seemed able to absorb the energy from both the blood-red crystal and the black crystal alike. So a blessing from the goddess should also be a form of energy, right? As the high-pitched chanting rang out, the bishop with graying hair looked at Rain, raising his scepter. A blue light grew stronger and more brilliant, and the next second, a blue glow enveloped Rain. A cool and mysterious energy seeped into Rain's body. In streams and strands. System prompt immediately followed. Ding, detected a presence of massive unknown absorbable energy nearby. Absorb, note, after absorption it can be converted into specific professional experience points. Rain felt an inexplicable joy in his heart. Indeed it can. In his heart he silently chose yes. Subsequently, the blue energy was quickly absorbed. Ding, a total of 1,976 supernatural experience points converted. Please choose Knight, Transcendent, / Wizard Apprentice, Transcendent, / Beast Tamer, Transcendent to enhance. Not bad at all. This trip to the Church of the Sea Goddess was certainly worth it. But on which transcendent profession should he use it? This suddenly put Rain in a difficult position, because adding it to any one of the transcendent professions, he would receive the reward of rising one level only. At the same time, in a study of Earl Hab's mansion. What? Giovanni died in battle. Alonso stood up abruptly upon hearing the news, questioning with a shocked face. Yes, according to the report from the spies, it was witnessed firsthand. Rain killed Beast Rider Giovanni in battle, Butler Mitchell said, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Just moments ago, when he heard this news, he too was astounded. Everybody knew that as head of the Brotherhood of the Wilderness, Giovanni not only helped the Black Flame cult, but also handled many difficult affairs for many nobles within County Town. In the upper echelons of Meister County society, the Beast Rider was very well known, but it was such a man who was slain on the spot in a one-on-one fight by Rain. Are you sure no one else helped? Alonso still found it hard to believe and asked again. Positive, the spy was very clear it was one-on-one. I too have repeatedly confirmed this. Mitchell nodded, affirming it with certainty. Alonso paced with a frown, and after several seconds, as though realizing something, he quickly gave orders. Notify Baron Norman immediately, tell him this news, and see if he needs any assistance. If we can help, promise it on my behalf. At once, my lord, Butler Mitchell said, bowing slightly and quickly leaving the room. Maest County City. Within the great hall of the Monsoon and Ocean Goddess Temple. Rain glanced at the attribute panel, observing the experienced situation of each transcendent profession, and his face showed contemplation. Wizard Apprentice, Transcendent, LV4, 358/1000/ Knight, Transcendent, LV5, 795/2000/ Beast Tamer, Transcendent, LV5, 64/2000. After a swift deliberation, Rain first ruled out the Knight, Transcendent profession panel because he was about to face many battles, and his current means of combating opponents were mainly Knight combat skills. Thus, the Knight panel could garner a considerable amount of experience. Next, as for the Beast Tamer, he had some new potions he wanted to try, which he estimated could bring a substantial amount of experience. From this perspective, it seemed that the first option was the most challenging to advance. Therefore, in the end, Rain focused his attention on the Wizard Apprentice Transcendent profession panel. As Rain silently chanted Wizard Apprentice, he instantly used 1,976 experience points on the Wizard Apprentice Transcendent profession panel. Suddenly a system prompt appeared. Congratulations, your Wizard Apprentice Transcendent profession level has advanced. The profession level of Wizard Apprentice Transcendent on the panel increased from LV4 to LV5. 1,325/2000, and at the bottom of the panel, it displayed remaining attribute points, 3, and remaining skill points, 2. Seeing this, a radiant smile couldn't help but spread across Rain's face. The goddess's blessing, it really was quite good. Rain sincerely performed a knight's salute to Bishop Shen and said, "Thank the goddess and thank you, your excellency the bishop." After a friendly conversation, Rain took the initiative to say he had matters to attend to at home. Thus, after saying his goodbyes to Bishop Shen and Dean Rudolph, Rain slowly walked out of the hall. Watching Rain's departing figure, Bishop Shen turned his head to ask, "Rudolph, it's still your discerning eye. I didn't expect that the youth you reported to me once has grown to this extent. It's a pity such an excellent young man did not join our church." When Rain rode back to his new residence on his tall, black warhorse, the first to greet him was the greyhound Cookie. since Rain had entrusted his sister Bo-hee with Cookie's care before leaving, and after a month of adding a few drops of mutant growth potion to its meals 3 times a day, Cookie's physique had grown significantly beyond that of an average greyhound. Moreover, Rain keenly noticed that Cookie's body had begun to change from a slender dog, with muscles clearly bulging out, moving further away from the greyhound's characteristic slim figure, seemingly beginning some kind of mutant growth. Not bad. Rain nodded slightly. Although the bulking up might lead to a decrease in speed, he could accept this kind of mutation. If it had mutated like the king of dogs' colt, acquiring an ability like rapid breeding, that would have been problematic for him. Seeing that Cookie, who had been playing with her, suddenly dashed away, Bo-hee was taken aback, only to then look up and call out with a joyous expression, "Brother, brother's back." Rain dismounted, picked up his sister Bo-hee, lovingly ruffled her hair with a smile. Soon, the news of Rain's return spread throughout the new manor. In a moment, the beautiful matron Jennifer also briskly walked out from a villa within the estate. However, when she saw Rain exchanging pleasantries with family, the matron could only hold back her desire to rush into Rain's arms, and instead, she watched them with a beaming smile. It didn't take long for Rain to notice his mother, who had a subtle worry on her beautiful face. Rain said to his parents, Emma and old Rain, "Father, Mother, I have something I need to discuss with Baroness Crowley." Go ahead." His mother Emma agreed without suspicion, nodding readily. During the time Rain was away, Baroness Crowley got along very well with her, and to Emma, it seemed that the ladies of noble families were not as difficult to get along with as she had imagined. Especially this stunningly beautiful Baroness, although only a few years younger than her, the two together looked like they were from 2 different generations. Her husband barely dared to lift his head whenever he saw the beautiful matron, immediately turning red at the sight of her. This made Emma somewhat envious of the Baroness's natural beauty. Watching the tall Rain and the elegant matron leave, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that these two make a good pair. But soon Emma shook her head, casting this ridiculous idea out of her mind. It would have made more sense if Miss Jenny had become Rain's wife. This arresting Baroness, as beautiful as she was a widow, plus she was ultimately too old. Read new chapters at Empire. Rain and the beautiful matron quickly made their way to the study on the 2nd floor. The matron locked the door, and the smile she had held in front of others could no longer be sustained. With a troubled face, she handed Rain something that looked like an invitation card, saying worriedly, "Darling, this is Baron Norman's letter of challenge for a duel to the death." In private, the beautiful matron now addressed Rain as darling. Rain smiled, said nothing, took the letter of challenge and casually opened it to read, "Baron Rain, given that the dishonor you brought upon the Norman family can only be cleansed with blood, please make certain to accept the challenge to defend the honor of a knight in a duel in the county town arena on the 2nd Sunday of the month of white snow, until one of us falls, after which all grievances shall be considered null and void." Rain burst into incredulous laughter on the spot when he saw such a shameless challenge letter. God damn the insult to the Norman family. It's your Norman family's repeated assassination attempts on me that have led to the current situation. However, Rain soon realized that this was a strategy on the opponent's part. Start with a verbal attack, garnering people's sympathy, with the main idea being that I, a newly minted baron, have insulted the Norman family. Otherwise, why would I challenge you to a duel? As for evidence, of course, there's none. That's how the nobility operates. However, seeing the worried expression on the beautiful woman's face beside him, Rain gently smiled, stepped forward, wrapped his arms around her tender and graceful body and comforted her. "Jennifer, don't worry. Perhaps the situation isn't as bad as you imagine." After thinking for a while, to comfort the beautiful woman, Rain took out the silver conch medal that Bishop Shin had just awarded him and handed it to her. The woman's beautiful eyes first looked at Rain with confusion, but when she took the medal and saw it, she quickly understood and exclaimed, "Is this the silver conch medal of the Monsoon and Ocean Goddess Church?" "Exactly. Explore more adventures at Empire. This is very difficult to be awarded. Many people dedicate their entire lives to the Goddess Church and don't even get the Iron Shell medal." "My dear, how did you get this medal?" The beautiful woman turned her head and curiously asked. Rain didn't answer directly, but asked with a smile, "Do you know about the Wilderness Brotherhood?" The woman nodded affirmatively. "Of course, they are infamous throughout Meister County. Some time ago, shops under the Crowley family were also disturbed by gang members instigated by them. I remember it took a lot of effort for me to put things right. Do you know who their leader is? Rain continued to ask. It seems to be someone nicknamed Beast Knight Giovanni, with incredible strength. It's said that apart from the great knights whom he is slightly wary of, he doesn't even take peak knights seriously. The woman answered promptly despite not understanding why Rain suddenly mentioned the Wilderness Brotherhood and Giovanni. Very well, whom do you think is stronger? Giovanni or this Baron Norman at present? Rain posed another question. That about the same. They both are said to have combat strength very close to that of a great knight, but maybe Giovanni is a little stronger, she contemplated and then replied. Remember you were wondering why the Goddess Church would award me with this silver conch medal. Because I killed Giovanni. Rain smiled, looking at the beautiful woman as he revealed the answer. Instantly the woman's eyes widened in shock, her cherry lips parted wide enough to fit an egg. This, the woman struggled to articulate her thoughts. Obviously saying this is impossible would be inappropriate, and saying how could this be possible would be doubting Rain, so naturally she didn't voice these thoughts. What the woman didn't realize was that her man had grown so powerful. No, what was most terrifying was the rate of his strength increase. To think that Rain had only just become a formal knight a few months ago. My God, this was completely unbelievable. Soon, the woman understood why Rain had gone around in such a big circle. Because her worries vanished in an instant, the woman's previously anxious face quickly faded away, her fair skin beginning to glow radiantly, and her seductive, silky eyes looked at Rain with deep affection mixed with admiration. Being gazed at so intently by the beautiful woman, Rain also felt a surge of masculine pride swell in his heart. Although dinner time was approaching, the two, impassioned as dry tinder to flame, quickly got into action. Rain gently picked up the woman and placed her in front of the study window for her to gaze out, while he lifted her skirt, revealing her fair, rounded. Concerned about servants coming to call them for dinner and any other potential disturbances at any moment, this only increased the level of excitement quite a bit. The woman, suppressing her breaths, quickly succumbed. Moving into a sage-like state of mind, Rain began to contemplate serious matters. Because if a man's mind is only filled with thoughts of women revolving everything around them, but that will only slow down the speed at which a man draws his sword. Rain had long since realized this, so these things were merely diversions from his monotonous training, or rather, a way for him to feel joyously content before throwing himself back into training and battle with an even better disposition. Reviewing the prerequisites for advancing his weapon master, legendary, profession panel, Rain found that aside from the first 3 extraordinary battle techniques at level 10, the thing likely holding him back was a beast essence. As for extraordinary battle techniques at level 10, it was mainly about obtaining enough skill points through raising the profession level. However, for the beast essence, it seemed he knew only one way to get it. That was through the county town's military supplies office. Yet, Rain had just thought of a problem. His dueling opponent, Baron Norman, was a retired Imperial Navy officer. If Rain were to go to the military supplies office himself, it would likely be that news would reach Norman's ears fast and create obstacles for him, or for obtaining the beast essence. After some thought, Rain looked down and asked, "By the way, Jennifer, do you know about beast essence potions? The beast essence needed for a knight to become a great knight." The woman, nestled in Rain's arms, spoke in a languid post-Rain tone. "Yes, what is the fastest way to obtain this?" "Oh, and if raw materials are needed, I still have 2 beast hearts," Rain added. Hearing this, Jennifer, who had been lying down, lifted her head, blinked her beautiful eyes, and wore a look of surprise, seemingly unable to believe the man's words before her. Although she was not a knight, as the ruler of the Crowley family, she naturally knew such common knowledge. The implication in Rain's words was very clear: he needed the essence of the beast. This meant that the man before her, no, the great man, was about to challenge the level of a great knight. But it was currently the snow moon, and Jennifer knew from Emma that Rain had just turned 16. Was he about to become a great knight? My God, a 16-year-old great knight, could there be such an astonishing occurrence in Minster County town? This time, Jennifer did not even ask Rain if he was confident about ascending to the great knight rank. Instead, she assumed that her young man surely was. Wait, also, did Rain just say he had 2 ready beast hearts in his possession? Jennifer felt overwhelmed. Calming her excitement, for the sake of her young man's significant affair, Jennifer pondered seriously and said softly, "There are 3 ways, but which is most suitable?" I'm not certain. Moreover, this involves safety issues, so ultimately, you'll need to decide. Jennifer said this while pointing gently at Rain's chest with her fair fingers. In the entire Meister County, there are only 2 master pharmacists, and one is not adept at creating magic potions from beast essences. So in reality, there's only one master pharmacist in the county town who can make the beast essence, and that is Master Holland. However, the problem is, compared to the masters at the Royal Alchemist Association, Master Holland's success rate, whether in terms of potion efficacy or manufacturing success, leaves much to be desired. If it were low or intermediate level magic potions, it would still be fine, but the beast essence is a high-level magic potion, and I'm afraid the success rate is worrying. Yet this should be the fastest method. Normally, if Master Holland agrees, he could complete the beast essence in 3 days. Of course, what you might receive in 3 days could also be a failure. Secondly, it would be through the Yaxen auction house, an enormous auction house spanning the entire empire, reportedly backed by one of the empire's most significant figures. Perhaps other auction houses might not have access to a beast essence, but the Yaxen auction house likely can, though at a very high price. However, timing isn't definite. It could be very quick, or it might take a month. Lastly, it would be through official imperial channels. Dear, as an imperial public servant, now endowed with the rank of Baron, you can directly order beast essence, of course, providing beast hearts can greatly reduce the price, but this method is the slowest, requiring at least a month. Hearing Jennifer's profound knowledge of various secrets gave Rain a delighted surprise, as if he had serendipitously discovered a treasure. To think that aside from her stunning beauty, the lady was not just a decorative vase. She was vastly knowledgeable about nobility secrets, business intelligence, and more. Her just completed item-by-item analysis was extremely helpful to him. Oh, Jennifer, one more thing. Can you send someone to contact the sheriff of Flashgold Town, Hamilton, and tell him I invite him to discuss a matter? Rain said. The beautiful woman replied, lying against Rain's chest obediently. Feeling quite pleased, Rain felt it necessary to reward the beautiful woman further, and thus, it was not until a servant came to report that dinner was ready, half an hour later, that the two concluded their deep interaction. The dazzling beauty tidied her disheveled hair, restoring her dignified matronly appearance, and they exited the study one after the other. It must be said, the beautiful woman's efficiency was exceptional. Shortly after dinner, Rain saw Hamilton, who had just arrived in the study. Upon seeing Rain, Hamilton grabbed him immediately and said gravely, "Do you know about the deadly duel Baron Norman has challenged you to?" Rain nodded, his face inevitably carrying a wry smile. He then repeated part of what he had discussed with Jennifer to Hamilton. Though Hamilton had mentally prepared himself to estimate Rain's combat ability as highly as possible, what Rain had just shared still utterly astounded him. After examining Rain from top to bottom, the person he knew best, yet felt so unfamiliar, Hamilton asked, "Rain, did you really kill Giovanni Solo?" Although Rain had already explained clearly, the silver conch medal from the Goddess Church was definitely authentic. Hamilton was still hard-pressed to believe that his former subordinate, his lieutenant, had reached such heights that he had to look up to. Seeing Rain nod, Hamilton sighed. However, Hamilton quickly adjusted his mindset and said, "But Rain, you still can't be careless. Baron Norman has rich combat experience and his combat ability is not inferior to Giovanni's." "I understand," Rain nodded and said. "By the way, Rain, you called me here for what?" Hamilton asked. "Sir, I wanted to ask about anything particular I should pay attention to in the process of transitioning from knight to great knight," Rain asked. You've already gotten to this extent." Hamilton's eyes instantly lit up as he looked piercingly at Rain. "Should be soon," Rain nodded. Hamilton appeared contemplative but did not immediately answer Rain's question. After a while he finally spoke. "The biggest difference between a great knight and a knight lies in the study of the Baron Norman's mansion." Baron Alonso's butler Mitchell was paying a visit to Baron Norman. "Lord Baron, I bring greetings from Baron Alonso, and first of all, congratulations on your strength restoration to its peak," Mitchell began. "Thank Alonso for me," Norman replied with reserved pride, feeling a touch of displeasure in his heart. If before, he needed to show some respect to the butler of the Earl's eldest son, Alonso, now that he had restored his strength and might soon become a great knight, that was no longer the case. He thought that even if Alonso himself had come to congratulate him, it would be fitting, given his successful recovery through the secret potion. However, this time, like always, they had merely sent a butler over. Although Mitchell wasn't strong, having been immersed in noble society for so many years, he could guess a bit of Baron Norman's true feelings from his attitude and expressions. After silently mocking in his heart, he said with a smile, "Lord Baron, I have some news that I believe you'll find interesting. It concerns your upcoming duel with Rain." "Oh." Baron Norman raised an eyebrow, giving Mitchell a casual glance, not very concerned, because as far as Baron Norman was concerned, his current strength allowed him to completely disregard any news about Rain. Still, since Mitchell mentioned it, he might as well listen. Today, outside the county town, Rain single-handedly killed the leader of the Wilderness Brotherhood, the Beast Knight Giovanni. Mitchell announced gravely, delivering shocking news. "What?" Baron Norman's originally calm face suddenly turned to one of astonishment, and he stared at Mitchell with intense eyes, involuntarily exclaiming. Indeed, a smile crept at the corner of Mitchell's mouth. "That's what you get for pretending. Shocked, aren't you, thinking you're all that just because your power has been restored? You're merely a longsword in the hands of Lord Baron Alonso, and what we are doing is simply making this longsword sharper." "Absolutely true. Our men witnessed it with their own eyes." Mitchell suppressed the smile on his lips and spoke solemnly. Baron Norman was no stranger to weathering storms. Aside from his initial lapse, he quickly regained his composure. He didn't speak for a long moment, instead frowning in thought. Beast Knight Giovanni was not only familiar to Baron Norman but a long time ago, due to a matter involving a family caravan. He had even crossed swords. At that time Norman had not been injured and was at his peak, but he still found himself slightly inferior in the fight, though Giovanni, wary of his strength, had retreated on his own. So, even with his strength now restored to its peak, Norman did not dare claim he could defeat Giovanni, yet Rain had already done so. This sent Norman's mood plummeting from the crest of a wave down to the trough. He had thought that the upcoming bloody duel in a week's time was a done deal. "Rain, no matter how talented, if I don't give you the chance to grow and nip you in the bud early, wouldn't that solve the problem?" But now it seemed he had misjudged. Rain's growth rate was simply too astonishing. This level of talent, even if placed in the provincial city of Minster, would be quite explosive. It took a while, but finally Butler Mitchell spoke with a beaming smile. "Lord Alonso means that whatever you need from us, just ask. Our goals are aligned. We all want you to emerge victorious in the bloody duel next week." Norman nodded his head. It seemed from this, his original plan had to be advanced. Originally, his idea was to kill Rain in the bloody duel, and then, riding on the momentum of victory, take the giant beast essence potion and strive to break through to become a great knight in one fell swoop. For someone his age, this was likely the greatest opportunity to break through to the rank of great knight. If he failed this time, there would be no secret potions left to restore him to his peak strength. Facing Rain, who could already kill Giovanni, it seemed the only way to achieve victory was for him to break through and become a great knight. Although 2 days ago, he had already placed an order through his special channels for a bottle of giant beast essence, at the very least, it would take half a month to be delivered to Meister. There just wasn't enough time. After considering, Baron Norman spoke up. "I need a bottle of giant beast essence. The sooner the better. At the latest, it must be delivered the day before the bloody duel. Can you manage it?" "What?" Mitchell's face showed shock. He immediately understood Baron Norman's intention. The other party wanted to challenge the Great Knight realm in advance. If successful, he could simply crush Rain in the bloody duel to claim victory. Truly worthy of being an elite from the Imperial Navy, Tusk. He underestimated the man. Such courage, risking his life for victory. "All right, I will inform Baron Alonso immediately. Though it will be difficult, I believe Lord Alonso will find a way." "There's no time to waste, Baron Norman. I must take my leave now." Knowing the gravity of the situation, Mitchell chose to leave immediately. When Mitchell arrived at Baron Alonso's study and relayed the details of the meeting, Alonso pondered and said, "There should still be a giant beast heart in the family treasury. I will request it from Lord Father immediately, and then Mitchell, you take it to Master Holland. Also, contact the Yaxen auction house for me and inquire whether they have any giant beast essence. No matter the cost, we must secure it." "Yes, respected Baron." Late at night, in fishing port town of Meister County. Bright moonlight scattered across the sea, sparkling on the waves. A small boat swooshed onto the sand. 7 or 8 fully armed men quickly disembarked the boat, scanning the surroundings. Following that, a squad leader-looking man whispered, "General Parix, all clear, you may disembark." No sooner had the squad leader finished speaking than a gleaming suit of plate armor stepped out of the boat's cabin, crushing a hermit crab into a pulp under his boot on the sandy beach. Looking up the shining armor, a burly man in half-plate was seen exiting the cabin. After surveying his surroundings, he asked, "Have you made contact with our liaison in Meister, Magi's? Where are the people coming to meet us? That fool Andre to be wiped out in one fell swoop, such an embarrassment. Now I have to come and clean up his mess." It appeared that General Parix was quite dissatisfied with being sent by the rebel faction to oversee the overall operations in Meister County. Facing the stream of curses from Brigadier General Parix, not a single one of the sturdy men around him dared to speak up or join the conversation. Each of them kept their gaze straight, surveying their surroundings with the utmost focus, as if they were all absorbed in their sentry duties. This bored Brigadier General Parix considerably. "Who?" a burly man asked in a low voice, his eyes blazing as he stared at the pitch-black coast. Soon a gaunt man clad in leather armor appeared, and upon seeing Parix, bowed respectfully and said, "Brigadier General, I have been sent by Lord Magi's to assist you. Since our original station has been destroyed, this time Lord Magi's has helped us find a new base. It is still in the Wild Wolf Hills, but the location has been changed. It's now at the former encampment of the Wild Wolf Bandits. Their main force was just annihilated today, and reliable information indicates that it was by the same person who destroyed our base." Go on, tell me more," said Brigadier General Parix, showing interest as he looked at the gaunt man. Before he came here, he had already received Magi's assessment of the entire situation in Maiste County, and specifically, the intelligence had pointed out the prime suspect for the destruction of their base, a newly minted baron named Rain. In Magi's view, if they wanted to raise the banner of the Zaral Rebellion again in Maiste County, this Rain was the perfect figurehead. However, in Brigadier General Parix's eyes, his mission in Maiste was much more important, and he had considerable doubts about Magi's suggestion. The aforementioned Rain was merely a small pebble that could easily be crushed underfoot. Magi's Pa, just a high-ranking spy with far too narrow a perspective. This. "Brigadier General, I only heard the news. It is said that Rain faced down and killed the leader of the Wild Brotherhood, Giovanni, and a group of Wild Wolf bandits outside Maiste County City," the leather-armored man explained. This Rain again, that. "What, the Wild Brotherhood, the leader, is he very strong?" Parix asked, puzzled. An enigmatic organization local to Maiste, and the strength of its leader Giovanni is only slightly less than that of a Great Knight," the leather-armored man went on to explain. "Only slightly less than a Great Knight? So this Giovanni isn't a Great Knight?" You are correct, Brigadier General." And how long did it take this Rain to kill this so-called leader?" "They were evenly matched, and the battle lasted for quite some time." Next time don't bother reporting such trivialities. What you need to focus on are individuals in Maiste with the strength of Great Knights." "Got it," Parix said with disdainful laughter. "Good. Yes, Brigadier General." Inside the study of Rain's new residence in Maiste County City, the conversation between Rain and Hamilton was still ongoing. The biggest difference between a Great Knight and a Knight lies in the body's secondary evolution and the use of primal force. During the Knight phase, as our training deepens generally, when we reach the status of a peak Knight, primal force begins to develop within our bodies. However, at that stage, we are still unable to control it at will. Hearing this, Rain became somewhat perplexed. He was already capable of controlling it at will, so Hamilton's statement seemed slightly off. Nevertheless, Rain chose not to interrupt him and continued to listen. Hamilton went on. "The reason why a Great Knight's combat power can crush that of a Knight is key. A Great Knight can summon primal force to cover the body and weapon, thereby greatly enhancing both offensive and defensive power." After listening to Hamilton's explanation, Rain's confusion didn't lessen, but instead increased. After some thought, Rain asked, "Lord Hamilton, are there any who can control that bit of primal force at will during the Knight phase?" "Yes, this generally only occurs among those with exceptional will or conviction, such as a peak Knight completely devoted to the longsword, who might be able to control that bit of primal force in battle. At the Knight phase, those who can exert extraordinary combat power with a longsword are referred to as swordmasters. Swordmaster possesses killing power comparable to a Great Knight's, but there is a vast disparity in terms of defensive power." "That makes sense," Hamilton's words were now largely in agreement with those of Master Ganther, and the system's job change prompt also corroborated this. Comparable to the killing power of a great knight, huh? Recalling the scenes of his own conquests over the sea serpent and the scale-bearded iron turtle, Rain indeed felt that with conviction and primal force imbued greatsword, it seemed capable of slicing through anything. Lord, you just mentioned a great knight can wield primal force on their longsword in battle. How does that differ from a sword, Master? Rain asked again. Rain had his own guesses on this matter and was inquiring Hamilton to confirm his thoughts. Hamilton shook his head before replying, "It's different. You can consider a swordmaster as the most special among great knights. Their longswords are not just infused with primal force, but also their convictions. It's a peculiar combination of conviction and primal force, possessing exceptionally lethal force." As expected, Rain nodded slightly. This matched what he had surmised earlier. Now he had one last question. Lord, regarding the high-grade magic potion essence from those giant beasts, are there any transcendent distinctions or anything else that should be noted? You should know that advancing magic potions have quite a few intricacies. Upon hearing this question, Hamilton smiled and said, "That's a good question. Actually, even before the emergence of high-tier magic potions like the Behemoth Essence, it was not impossible to advance from a knight to great knight, just extremely rare, almost 1 in 100. If one forcibly breaks through and fails, the consequences are either death or severe injury. However, with the aid of high-tier magic potions like the Behemoth Essence, the success rate has increased significantly, almost to 1 in 10, and the side effects of a failed breakthrough have relatively reduced a lot. In this aspect, the Behemoth Essence is different from other advancing magic potions, as a high-tier magic potion. Its primary function is to provide your body with enough energy for higher-level evolution. The essence of the second evolution is to strengthen your existing transcendent traits and gradually root them in your bloodline. This process does not create new transcendent traits. Rain suddenly understood. That's why the magic potions for officially advancing to knight was so precious. So, to assess the quality of a Behemoth Essence, the main criteria is the amount of special evolutionary substance it contains, right? Rain thought for a moment and then concluded. Hamilton looked at Rain with approval and said, "Exactly. But the more powerful the Behemoth, the more evolutionary substance can be extracted from its heart. However, in reality, Rain, the most critical or the most difficult part of advancing to great knight lies in the control over one's own body with a transcendent will. Otherwise, promotion is bound to fail." Rain nodded in agreement. Then he remembered that whether he was advancing to a great knight or a weapon master, the system's description for Behemoth Essence was not specific, it just needed to be available. That means, as long as he has the Behemoth Essence, he can inevitably advance to a great knight, regardless of the quality of the Behemoth Essence. This is truly the greatest benefit. Having it equals success. My lord, there's something I need to ask your help with contacting Colonel Connor. I have a beast heart here, and would like to request the military or the masters from the Royal Alchemist Association to help me craft a bottle of Behemoth Essence. As Rain spoke, he handed the box containing the Behemoth heart from a nearshore plesiosaur to Hamilton. You have a Behemoth heart." Hamilton showed a surprised expression again, but quickly regained his composure, as it was not surprising Rain had obtained one since he had even killed Giovanni. "Yes, I acquired one during my recent visit to Rossby County," Rain said with a smile. "Good, I'll contact Connor as soon as possible." Hamilton quickly agreed without hesitation. Just about to leave, Hamilton suddenly stopped, turned around and said, "Rain, there's one thing. Never mind, I'll tell you after your duel." Meanwhile, in a lavish mansion in Mace County City within a dim underground hall, Black Flame Priest Merrill, sweating profusely, reported, "High Priest, it's bad news. Lord Giovanni's mission has failed and he was killed on the spot by Rain." "What, Giovanni is dead?" The fat high priest suddenly stood up from his large chair and immediately asked back. "Yes, my lord," Merrill answered with his head bowed. This was the first time he had seen such a loss of composure from the high priest. He began pacing slowly in the underground hall while muttering, "How could this be possible? With Giovanni's speed, even if he couldn't win, he should have been able to escape smoothly." "High priest, there is another piece of news." Merrill's face soured as he spoke, knowing revealing it might further infuriate the high priest, but he still chose to say it. The high priest stopped and looked at Merrill suspiciously, as if questioning, could there be worse news than Giovanni's death? Um, After killing Lord Giovanni, Rain sent his corpse directly to the temple of the goddess of monsoons and oceans. Meryl's voice trailed off more lightly, because the high priest's pale face suddenly flushed. Meryl knew this was not a good sign. It was an indication of the high priest's extreme anger. Boom! The high priest, with a ferocious look, extended his dry, thin arms and blasted a large clump of black flame onto the floor of the underground hall, creating a large hole. Damn this Rain, I must have him killed. This black flame blast was so powerful, several times stronger than that of ordinary black flame priests. It so frightened Meryl that he almost jumped, worried that the high priest might vent his anger on him. Meryl quickly said, "High priest, perhaps we won't need to act ourselves to achieve the goal of killing Rain. Because there's a rumor bubbling among the nobility of Maest County that Baron Norman is set to have a bloody duel with Rain next Sunday at the county's dueling ground." "Oh, is that so?" "Yes, my lord." Meryl wiped the sweat from his forehead, relieved to see the high priest's mood had improved. "Is that the retired Imperial naval officer Norman?" It seemed he was recalling something. The high priest continued to inquire. "Exactly, that's him. I remember, wasn't he gravely injured by a sneak attack, which greatly reduced his strength? His current strength should still be inferior to Giovanni's, right? This doomed duel, isn't it just going to inflate Rain's arrogance further?" the high priest said with an unpleasant tone. "That's true, but news from Baron Alonso's side states that Baron Norman's strength has already been restored to its peak by a magic potion, and he is now trying to break through to become a great knight before the bloody duel. Once he steps into the realm of the great knight, I believe the duel will be Rain's last battle." "I see." The obese high priest nodded, seemingly in a much better mood. He paced back to the chair in the center of the hall and said, "Lamar, since Giovanni has returned to the embrace of the god of hunting, you will be in charge of contacting the Wilderness Brotherhood. This." High priest, just moments ago, the Wilderness Brotherhood's headquarters in the county town was destroyed by the seasonal winds and the sea goddess church. Lamar wiped sweat beads from his forehead and said, "What?" The high priest felt as if his mood was on a roller coaster upon hearing the report, suddenly engulfed by a sense of irritation with no outlet, and his gaze at Lamar turned quite unfriendly. "This is also because of Rain, isn't it?" He quickly recalled what Lamar had just mentioned about Rain, handing Giovanni's body. The goddess church, and he asked in response. "Yes, high priest." Lamar nodded and slyly suggested, "Otherwise, why don't we gather some men in the next 2 nights and launch a night raid on Rain's new residence in the Noble District? I believe even if he survives, his entire family will surely perish." "No, that's not good." The high priest immediately shook his obese head. He wasn't foolish enough to risk the entire Black Flame Church just to avenge Giovanni. Openly making a move within the county town would only make the Black Flame Church an immediate target of both the Empire and the Goddess Church. This would only end up benefiting other powers such as the Sea God Sect. "No hurry, isn't Rain going to take a position in Fishing Port Town? Since that's the case, let the Sea God Sect deal with him," the high priest said calmly after a long while, shrinking his obese body into the chair. The next day, the beautiful Baroness Crowley was up early and left by carriage. For Jennifer, today was a busier day. Following Rain's instructions, the first thing she would do is to rush to the blacksmith shop and arrange to quietly purchase chromium iron ingots on the market, as well as acquiring cold iron ingots or cold iron ore through multiple channels. Later, she would go to Yaxen Auction House to inquire about purchasing the essence of a giant beast. As agreed upon the previous night, if the high-level magic potion beast essence could be purchased within a week, even if the cost was high, she would choose to buy a bottle at a premium price. However, if the delivery was after the duel, then there was no need for it. Last, she needed to make a trip to Master Holland, the potion master. At her feet at the moment was a delicate wooden box, which contained a giant beast heart from Rain, also the most important raw material for the high-level magic potion beast essence. After waking up, Rain didn't head straight to the blacksmith shop to raise his profession level, but instead rode a carriage that had been arranged early on to Earl Hab's mansion. Since he already had an agreement with the Earl, the first thing Rain needed to do after returning to the county town was naturally to report to the Earl. Soon the carriage smoothly arrived at the gates of Earl Hab's mansion, and led by the butler, Rain quickly found himself in the luxurious study, face to face with Earl Habs. The Earl's pepper and salt hair was still impeccably combed, and he was dressed in a noble hunting outfit with gray and gold trim, looking very gentlemanly. On the chest of the hunting outfit was a pattern of the caliburd, woven with gold thread. It was clear that Earl Habs placed great importance on family honor. "Earl, good day," Rain bowed respectfully. When Earl Habs saw Rain enter, he put down his pen, lifted his head, and warmly sized up Rain, saying, "Rain, it seems your training has had good results." "It has indeed been quite beneficial. I've learned a lot during my training," Rain replied with a smile. "Very good. Young people should have this kind of upward momentum. Actually, I was counting on your return and was about to send someone to find you. Tell me, Rain, what is your view on the matter of Baron Norman challenging you to a duel?" "Well, I can't cancel it. I could still assign you official duties for a period." Rain was inwardly moved as he could tell that the Earl leaned slightly in his favor, but there was no need. Moreover, against a Norman family that had been sending assassins after him, Rain naturally wanted to eradicate them completely. Normal circumstances, Rain had no good solution to the continuous assassination attempts, but this time the other party had proposed a bloody duel, which, from a certain angle, suited Rain's desires. Because he had learned from Jennifer that Baron Norman was the backbone of the Norman family, and once the backbone was broken, the family's fate was predictable. Rain shook his head and said, "Earl, I also desire to confront Baron Norman to see how much progress I have truly made." Hearing Rain's refusal, Count Habs helplessly shook his head and said, "Very well. Then, in accordance with the glorious traditions of the Empire, the two of you will resolve your grudges in the dueling arena. Is the time set for next Sunday? Today is also Sunday. 7 days later, I will personally attend. During these 7 days, you prepare well for the duel, and as for Fishing Port Town, I will arrange for others to handle it first. Everything else can wait until after the duel is over." "Thank you, my lord." Rain bowed slightly to express his gratitude. 1 hour later, Rain arrived at the Crowley family blacksmith shop. In a separate smelting room, there was already a good amount of clay and a large stack of chrome iron ingots. There were only 4 or 5 ice iron ingots. However, there was no immediate need for the ice iron, so Rain was not in a hurry. Because he had previously attempted to continue making the cavalry's breastplate when he was promoted to armor caster, and only gained 5 professional experience points for armor casting, Rain now planned to try making parts of the chrome iron set. With an integrated molding approach, the chrome iron set's breastplate was a layered, exquisite chest armor, whose crafting was far more complicated than the previous cavalry chestplate, and naturally was not Rain's first choice. This time, Rain chose to make the chrome iron greaves, which included the lower leg part and was made of 2 chrome iron plates hinged together. That is to say, relying on the witchcraft scorching touch, Rain could imitate the forging process of the cavalry chestplate and in a short time quickly make the chrome iron greaves. This also meant that he could quickly gain a considerable amount of armor casting professional experience. At this moment, 7 or 8 chrome iron ingots glowed red-hot within the blacksmith's furnace, and Rain raised his hand, quietly chanting the incantation for the witchcraft scorching touch. Soon, a rich crimson glow began to appear in front of Rain's palm. For a time, the surrounding stray particles of fire energy quickly gathered in front of his palm. With the continuous output of his spiritual power, the flames in the forge suddenly leaped up significantly, and the 7 or 8 ingots began to redden and soften at a speed visible to the naked eye, turning into molten iron within minutes. Immediately, Rain opened a small gate on the blacksmith's furnace and poured the scorching chrome iron liquid into the clay molds he had prepared in advance. After cooling down, Rain took 2 shin armor pieces out of the clay molds and picked up a blacksmith's hammer to start hammering. Due to the improvement in strength, agility, and constitution, Rain found it much easier to work than before, and soon he joined the front and back chrome iron parts together to form a complete piece of greave. Then a system prompt appeared. "You have carried out the forging of the chrome iron greaves, and your comprehension has improved. You have understood a new skill, greave forging. Your skill in greave forging has improved. Experience plus 24. You focus on the forging of chrome iron greaves. Armor caster profession experience points plus 28. Rain was thrilled by what he saw. Just as he had expected. After choosing the chrome iron set from Crowley's Armor Casting Manual Volume 1, which was 1 level higher than the cavalry chestplate, the experience gained as an armor caster increased substantially. In addition, Rain sensed an inexplicable intuition about the current success rate of armor casting. This must be the effect of armor casting specialization LV1, which slightly increased his success rate in forging armor. After some thought, Rain quickly asked the people in the blacksmith shop to help him make about 10 pairs of matching clay molds, left and right greaves. Then Rain began to cast Scorching Touch repeatedly, entering a continuous cycle of melting and forging. The system prompts nearly spammed the screen. Throughout the day, aside from returning home for meal times, Rain spent all his time at the blacksmith shop. Although it was exhausting, the rewards were significant. Within one day, Rain's profession level as an armor caster had risen from LV1 to LV2. As a result, Rain received 1 attribute point and 1 skill point as a level-up reward. After dinner, the beautiful matron who had been busy outside nearly all day came to the blacksmith shop to find Rain. "Jennifer, by the look on your face, it seems things haven't gone very smoothly." Rain, who was in the midst of forging greaves, looked up and noticed the discontent on the beautiful woman's face. There's a bottle of ready-made beast essence at the Yaxon auction house, but the person in charge, Lennon, said that it was just reserved by someone yesterday. I negotiated for half a day, and even with a 30% surcharge, I couldn't secure it. The beautiful lady spoke, her spirit slightly dampened. Oh, a thought flashed through Rain's mind, and he already had an idea of who the reserver might be, likely not Norman, but Alonso. However, that didn't matter. "What about Master Holland?" Rain asked. He did agree to take on the work, but Master Holland received a batch of urgent orders yesterday and said he wouldn't have time to craft for us until after half a month, the beautiful lady said helplessly. "I see, no problem, let's continue to have Master Holland do the work." Rain thought for a moment and then said, Jennifer's beautiful eyes showed a hint of surprise as she looked at Rain. She had thought Rain would choose to give up since this timeline couldn't meet the blood duel by a whole week. "Don't worry, I have a plan," Rain said with a smile. Rain had anticipated this situation the day before. After learning from Hamilton that the combat power of a sword master was comparable to that of a great knight, Rain had made his plans. If, for instance, he were to raise his giant bear sword technique and the Tokkul hammer technique both to LV10, his strength would not only surpass that of a sword master, perhaps the term provisional great sword master would be more apt. No, to be precise, provisional weapon master. With the addition of the transcendent trait Iron Skin, LV3, and the trump card Healing with every attribute point addition, Rain felt that even if Norman became a great knight, he still had faith in himself to defeat him. It wasn't overconfidence, but rather, from his encounter with Giovanni, whose transformed strength was comparable to a great knight and who was still defeated by him, it was evident. "What, are you saying Rain spent the whole day at the blacksmith shop?" Alonso was astonished when he heard this news. "Yes, many people saw it, so it can't be fake." The butler, Mitchell, didn't understand either. Thud, thud, thud. A lean man dressed in leather armor entered promptly and reported, "Sir, you instructed me to keep a close watch on Baroness Crowley's wife, and this morning she just went to the Yaxon auction house and stayed there for a long time. However, I have no idea what they discussed specifically. Moreover, in the afternoon, she took a detour to Master Holland's place." Baron Alonso immediately turned his head to look at Mitchell by his side. After exchanging glances, both burst into laughter. Baron Alonso said, "Look, it turns out this Rain intentionally baffled us, while secretly having the Crowley family accomplish his true objective." "Mitchell, what do you think? What did Rain want to buy at the Yaxon auction house?" Mitchell chuckled and replied, "If I'm not mistaken, it should be beast essence." "Exactly, good thing you contacted the Yaxon auction house ahead of time yesterday. As for Master Holland, naturally, he can only attend to them after he's done making the beast potion for us." The thought of having anticipated Rain's plan made Alonso laugh heartily, and Mitchell too looked confident of victory, because he had a hand in managing both affairs. On the third day, Rain's armor casting technique reached LV3. On the fifth day, it advanced to LV4. As a result, the remaining attribute points on the system panel reached 6, and the remaining skill points were 5. However, after his profession level as an armor caster reached LV4, the experience points from crafting chromium steel greaves began to plummet dramatically. Rain knew that he needed to switch to a higher-tiered knight plate armor set if he wanted to continue advancing quickly. The snag was the quantity of ice iron ingots at hand seemed insufficient. He barely had over 10 blocks, and coupled with the unsmelted ice iron ore, It doesn't seem enough for Rain to raise his profession level as an armor caster to LV5.